The alarm cut through the darkness at 5:30 in the morning, pulling Claire Bennett from a sleep that had been too brief and too shallow. She silenced it with practiced speed, the motion so automatic that her eyes barely opened. The small studio apartment was still dark, but through the single window, she could see the first gray hints of dawn touching the Chicago skyline. November had arrived with its usual cruelty, stripping the trees bare and promising a winter that would be long and unforgiving. Claire sat on the edge of her narrow bed for a moment, allowing herself 30 seconds of stillness before the day demanded everything from her. At 26, she had learned to measure her rest in stolen moments: a quiet cup of coffee before her mother woke, a brief pause between patients, the walk from her car to the hospital entrance. These fragments of peace sustained her through the grinding reality of working double shifts at Memorial Heights Hospital while caring for a dying mother at home. She stood and moved through the apartment with the efficiency of someone who had learned not to waste motion. The space was modest but scrupulously clean. Worn furniture that had seen better decades, a small kitchen with a 2-burner stove, bills stacked neatly on a table that doubled as her dining area and desk. But there were fresh flowers in a glass jar by the window, daisies from the corner market, because her mother had taught her that beauty mattered even when money was scarce, especially when money was scarce. The door to the adjoining bedroom stood slightly ajar. Claire pushed it open slowly, quietly, years of nursing instinct making her steps soundless. Elena Bennett lay in the hospital bed that now dominated the small room, her breathing shallow but steady. At 52, she looked both younger and older than her years. The illness had stolen her flesh, but not her dignity. Her gray hair, which Claire washed and brushed every evening, lay neat against the pillow. Her hands, folded on top of the blanket, were thin as paper. Claire moved to her mother's side and checked the oxygen levels on the portable monitor. Stable. The cancer had spread from her lungs to her bones over the past 6 months, and the doctors had stopped offering treatments and started suggesting hospice. But Elena had refused to surrender entirely. Not yet. Not while her daughter still needed her. As if sensing Claire's presence, Elena's eyes opened. They were still sharp, still clear, the one part of her that the disease had not managed to diminish. "Good morning, Mama," Claire whispered. "Another day," Elena said, her voice soft but steady. "That's always a gift." They shared this ritual every morning, this quiet acknowledgement that Elena had survived another night. Claire helped her mother with her morning medications, 5 different pills that cost more than Claire's weekly grocery budget. Then she prepared breakfast: oatmeal with honey, weak tea, protein supplement that tasted like chalk but kept Elena's strength from failing entirely. While her mother ate, Claire prayed. She did it silently, her lips barely moving, but Elena knew. Elena always knew. Faith had been the foundation of their family, passed down from Claire's grandmother, strengthened through her father's death 7 years ago, and now tested daily as Elena faced her own mortality. "You're working a double today?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "Just through tonight, I'll be home by morning. You need to sleep, Claire. I sleep enough." Elena looked at her daughter with the expression mothers reserve for their children's lies, the ones told out of love rather than deception. But she did not argue. They both understood the mathematics of survival. The hospital paid Claire $17 an hour. Elena's treatment costs ran to thousands each month. Sleep was a luxury they could not afford. Before Claire left for work, she made sure her mother had everything within reach: water, medications, the phone, the remote control for the television Elena rarely watched. Claire had arranged for a neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to check on Elena during the day, but Elena insisted she needed nothing, that she was fine alone. They both knew this was another loving lie, but some lies were necessary for dignity. "Tell me about your new patient," Elena said as Claire gathered her things. "The special one they assigned you." Claire paused, surprised her mother remembered. "I haven't started yet. Today's my first shift with him." "But you're nervous, I can tell." "A little. He's high profile, wealthy family. The case is complicated." Elena reached for Claire's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Remember what your father used to say. Listen more than you speak, and you'll learn the truth of people. This patient, even if he can't talk back, his silence will tell you what you need to know." Claire squeezed her mother's hand gently. "I'll remember. And Claire, one more thing. Yes, Mama? Don't lose yourself in caring for everyone else. Save something for yourself. Promise me. Claire promised, though they both knew it was one more gentle fiction between them. Saving something for herself had never been Claire's way. She had chosen nursing not as a career, but as a calling, and callings did not respect boundaries between self and service. The drive to Memorial Heights Hospital took 40 minutes through morning traffic. Claire used the time to prepare herself mentally for the shift ahead. 12 hours on the medical floor, followed by 12 hours in the private suite on the 8th floor where her new patient waited. 24 hours of constant vigilance, of monitoring vitals and administering medications and providing comfort to people who were suffering. Most nurses burned out after a few years. Claire had been doing this for 5 and showed no signs of stopping. She arrived at the hospital just before 8 in the morning as the night shift was ending. Memorial Heights was one of Chicago's older hospitals, built in an era when medical facilities still tried to look dignified rather than merely efficient. Stone facade, high ceilings, long corridors that echoed with footsteps. The building had been modernized over the decades, but you could still feel its age in the bones of the structure, in the way certain floors creaked and certain rooms held the cold. Claire made her way to the 8th floor, where the private suites were located. These rooms were reserved for patients who could afford privacy, who wanted their suffering kept away from the general wards. The lighting was different here, softer. The nurses moved more quietly. Even the machines seemed to beep with more discretion. She found Dr. Rachel Harris in the hallway outside Suite 801, reviewing a thick patient file. Dr. Harris was 48, brilliant, exhausted, and one of the few people at Memorial Heights who treated nurses like colleagues rather than subordinates. She looked up as Claire approached. "Good morning, Claire. Ready for your new assignment?" "As ready as I can be without knowing much about it." Dr. Harris closed the file and studied Claire for a moment. "That's partly intentional. This case requires discretion. The patient's family is prominent. The media has been circling. And there are questions about the accident that put him here." "Questions?" "The kind that involve police investigators and insurance companies. The kind that make people nervous." Claire felt her stomach tighten slightly. "Dr. Harris, if there's any danger to the staff, I should know." "Not that kind of danger." "At least I don't think so. But this patient, Marcus Sullivan, he needs someone who can be trusted. Someone who sees people rather than dollar signs or headlines. That's why I chose you." The name registered in Claire's memory, Marcus Sullivan. She had seen it in newspapers, on television. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, breakthrough medications, billions in revenue. A car accident 3 months ago that had left the young CEO in a coma while his company teetered and his family fought over control. "He's been unresponsive for 3 months, Dr. Harris continued. "Stable vitals but no signs of consciousness. We've tried every standard protocol. Now we're focusing on basic care and hoping for a miracle." What happened to his previous nurses? They were competent but clinical. They treated him like a medical problem to solve. I want someone who will treat him like a human being who happens to be unconscious. Someone who will talk to him, engage with him, remind him that there's a world worth waking up to. Claire nodded slowly. "I can do that." "I know you can. That's why you're here." Dr. Harris handed her the file. "Read this. Familiarize yourself with his medical history. And Claire, one more thing. Document everything. Every visitor, every conversation, every small change. This case may become complicated. We need records." The warning was clear even if the specifics were vague. Claire took the file and promised to be thorough. She spent the rest of her morning shift on the general medical floor, caring for the parade of patients who cycled through Memorial Heights. An elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, a middle-aged man with pneumonia, a young mother with postpartum complications. Each case required her full attention, her complete presence, and she gave it without reservation. This was what she had been trained for, what she believed she had been called to do, making suffering bearable, providing dignity and vulnerability, being present when presence was all that could be offered. By the time her afternoon shift ended and her evening shift in Suite 801 began, Claire was already tired. But she had learned long ago that fatigue was just another constant to push through, like hunger or cold or doubt. She stood outside the door to Suite 801 for a moment, composing herself. Then she knocked softly, a gesture of respect, even though she knew no one would answer, and entered. The room was unlike any other in the hospital. Where the general wards were utilitarian and cramped, this space breathed with luxury disguised as comfort. Large windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked like it belonged in a home rather than a medical facility, warm lighting that could be dimmed or brightened according to preference. The medical equipment was present but pushed to the periphery, as if trying not to intrude on the illusion that this was simply a bedroom where someone was resting. In the center of this carefully constructed environment lay Marcus Sullivan. Claire approached the bed slowly, taking in details the way she had been trained. Male, early 30s, dark hair with premature gray at the temples, strong bone structure that spoke of health before the accident. His chart said 6'2" and 185 pounds, though 3 months of immobility had begun to steal his muscle mass, despite the physical therapy the staff provided. His hands, resting on top of the blanket, were well-formed but not soft. These were hands that had worked, that had built things, even if those things were corporate empires rather than physical structures. There was a framed photograph on the nightstand, Marcus shaking hands with someone at what looked like a charity gala. In the picture, his smile was confident, his posture commanding. The contrast between that vibrant man and this still figure was stark enough to be painful. "Hello, Mr. Sullivan," Claire said softly as she moved to check his vital signs. "My name is Claire. I'm your night nurse. I'll be taking care of you from now on." She worked methodically, checking blood pressure and heart rate and oxygen saturation. Everything was stable, exactly as the charts indicated. But as she adjusted his blanket and noticed his hands were cold, she fetched a warmer blanket from the supply closet. Small comforts mattered, even for unconscious patients, perhaps especially for unconscious patients. As she worked, Claire talked, not the clinical narration that some nurses used, explaining procedures in medical terminology. Instead, she spoke to him the way she would speak to anyone, conversationally, personally. "I'm going to play some music, if that's all right," she said, noticing the CD player on the shelf. "Looks like someone left Debussy here. That's beautiful music. Peaceful." She pressed play, and the opening notes of Claire de Lune filled the room, soft and haunting. Claire smiled slightly. "My name means bright moon," she said. "Claire, this song always reminds me of that. My mother used to play it when I was young." What Claire could not know, what no one in the hospital suspected, was that Marcus Sullivan heard every word. Behind his closed eyelids, his mind was fully conscious. He had been awake, truly awake, for nearly 3 months. In the first week after the accident, he had been genuinely unconscious, his brain swollen and traumatized from the impact. But then he had surfaced into awareness while his body remained stubbornly unresponsive, locked in, trapped, aware of everything but unable to signal his consciousness to anyone. At first, it had been terrifying beyond measure. But then Marcus had realized something crucial. Someone had tried to kill him. The brake failure had not been an accident. The maintenance records had been falsified, and if his would-be killer knew he was conscious, they might try again. So Marcus had made a choice. He would pretend. He would lie still and silent and listen. He would learn who wanted him dead, and he would wait for the moment when he could strike back safely. For 3 months, he had maintained this deception. Through neurological tests that he passed by remaining completely still, through family visits where he cataloged every word, every inflection, every telling pause, through the endless parade of nurses who treated him like an object to be cleaned and maintained, rather than a person who could hear their gossip and their complaints and their casual cruelty. Until now. Until this woman named Claire entered his room and spoke to him like he mattered. Her voice was different from all the others. Gentle, but not condescending. Present, but not intrusive. She explained what she was doing before she did it, as if his consent mattered even though she thought he could not give it. When she noticed his hands were cold, she brought him warmth without being asked. And when she played music, she chose something beautiful rather than leaving him in silence. "I don't know if you can hear me, Mr. Sullivan," Claire continued as she settled into the chair beside his bed. Some nurses say talking to unconscious patients is pointless, but I don't believe that. She paused, and Marcus could hear her take a slow breath. My father was in a coma before he died. I was 15. I read to him every day for 2 weeks. The doctor said he couldn't hear, that it was just for my benefit. But the day before he passed, he squeezed my hand, just once, just enough to let me know he was there. Marcus felt something unfamiliar move through him. Not pity, though Claire's story touched something deep, but recognition. This woman understood what it meant to be present for someone who could not respond. She knew the faith it required to speak into silence without any guarantee of being heard. "So I believe," Claire said quietly. "I believe you might be in there somewhere, and I won't let you be alone." In that moment, Marcus Sullivan made a decision that would change everything. He had been planning to maintain his silence until he had absolute proof of his brother's betrayal. But this woman, this nurse who spoke to him with such unguarded compassion, she deserved better than his deception. Not immediately. He could not reveal himself yet, but he would find a way to let her know, a way to tell her that she was not speaking into empty darkness. His heart rate increased slightly, just enough to make the monitor register a small change. Claire noticed immediately. She leaned forward, studying the display, then checking his pulse manually as if to confirm what the machine indicated. "Interesting," she murmured, making a note in his chart. "Patient shows autonomic response to verbal stimuli. Continue engaging communication." Marcus wanted to laugh, wanted to cry, wanted to scream that yes, he was here, he could hear her, she was not alone in this room. But he remained still, patient, waiting for the right moment. Claire stayed with him for the next several hours, performing the routine care that kept his body functioning. She gave him a bed bath with the same matter-of-fact professionalism she would use for any patient, but there was a gentleness in how she moved him, a respect for his dignity that others had not bothered to maintain. She massaged his arms and legs to prevent muscle atrophy. She turned him carefully to prevent bed sores. She did everything by the book, but she did it as if it mattered, as if he mattered. And she talked. Not constantly, not filling every silence with chatter. But she told him about her day, about Mrs. Patterson in room 412 who was recovering from pneumonia and kept asking for chocolate pudding, about the young resident who was brilliant but had the bedside manner of a caffeinated squirrel, about the November weather outside, the way the wind was stripping the last leaves from the trees. She did not tell him about her mother, not yet. That would come later, in the dark hours of night, when exhaustion lowered her defenses and loneliness made her more honest than she intended. Around midnight, Claire dimmed the lights and pulled the chair closer to Marcus's bed. She had been on her feet for nearly 16 hours, and the weariness showed in her movements. But she still had 8 more hours of her shift, and she settled in with the practiced endurance of someone who had learned to function on perpetual deficit. "I should read to you," she said. "Would you like that? I brought a book." She pulled a worn paperback from her bag. "Tuesdays with Maury." Claire opened it to a page she had marked and began to read aloud, the story of a young man reconnecting with his dying professor. Lessons about living and dying and what made a life meaningful. Marcus listened to her voice reading Maury's words about love being the only rational act, about how we must forgive ourselves and forgive others, about how death ends a life, but not a relationship. He listened and felt something he had not felt in years, not since before his mother died, not since before his father's coldness and his brother's jealousy had turned his family into a battlefield. He felt hope. When Claire finished the chapter, she closed the book and sat quietly for a moment. Then she spoke again, and this time her voice was softer, more vulnerable. "My mother is reading the same book right now. She has cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say she has maybe 6 months. She says that Maury got it right, that love is how you stay alive even after you die." Claire's voice caught slightly. "I want to believe that. I need to believe that." Marcus's heart rate increased again, more noticeably this time. The monitor beeped louder. Claire looked up, startled, and checked his vitals. Everything else was normal, just the heart rate, responding to her emotional confession. She wiped her eyes quickly and made another note in the chart. Then she reached out and took Marcus's hand. It was a small gesture, probably instinctive, but it sent electricity through his awareness. Human contact, warmth, connection. "You're fighting, aren't you?" Claire whispered. "I can feel it. You're still in there fighting to come back." If Marcus could have moved, if he could have responded, he would have gripped her hand in return. He would have told her yes, he was fighting, and that she was giving him reasons to fight. But all he could do was lie still and hold on to the sound of her voice like a lifeline in the dark. Claire stayed with him through the rest of the night, dozing occasionally in the chair, but waking at every change in his monitors, every small sound. When dawn began to gray the windows, she stood and stretched, her spine cracking audibly. She checked his vitals one more time, adjusted his position, made sure he was comfortable. Before she left, she did something that surprised them both. She leaned down and placed her hand gently on his forehead, a gesture that was more blessing than medical procedure. "Good morning, Mr. Sullivan. You made it through another night." "So did I. That's something." Then she was gone, and Marcus was alone with the morning light, and the knowledge that for the first time in 3 months, he was not entirely alone in his prison. The pattern repeated over the following week. Claire arrived each evening at 9 and stayed until 9 the next morning. 12-hour shifts that blurred into a continuous vigil. She brought music, different albums each night, jazz, classical, folk. She paid attention to which songs made his heart rate change, as if trying to map his preferences. She read to him from various books, poetry, short stories, news articles about current events, so he would not feel completely cut off from the world. And she talked. God, how she talked. Not nervously or to fill silence, but thoughtfully, sharing pieces of herself that Marcus suspected she shared with few others. On the second night, she told him about her father's death, how he had been a construction worker, strong and seemingly indestructible, until a stroke felled him at 45. How her mother had cared for him with such grace during those 2 weeks of dying. How 15-year-old Claire had learned what it meant to love someone through their suffering. On the third night, she told him about nursing school, how she had dreamed of becoming a doctor but could not afford medical school, how she had chosen nursing not as a backup but as a calling, because nurses were the ones who actually spent time with patients, who held their hands and heard their fears and made the terrible machinery of modern medicine feel more human. On the fourth night, she told him about her dream, a care home for people who could not afford fancy facilities, where every patient would be tucked in at night and someone would hold their hand and no one would die alone. She described it in such detail that Marcus could see it. Small, but immaculate. Gardens where patients could sit in the sun. Staff who were paid enough to care without burning out. "It's probably impossible," Claire said. "The economics don't work. Quality care costs money that poor people don't have." But I keep thinking there has to be a way, there has to be. Marcus, listening, made a silent promise. If he survived this, if he escaped his brother's trap and reclaimed his life, he would make Claire's dream real. He would fund it himself if necessary. It would be his gift to her, his thanks for keeping him sane during these impossible months. On the fifth night, Claire came to work with red eyes and exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. She performed her duties mechanically, her usual warmth dimmed. When she finally sat beside his bed, she was silent for a long time. Marcus waited, patient. He had learned to read the subtle shifts in her breathing, the small sounds she made when she was thinking or upset. Tonight she was both. Finally she spoke. "My mother had a bad scan today. The cancer is spreading faster than they expected. They're talking about weeks now instead of months." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the effort that steadiness cost her. "I should be used to this," she continued. "I see death every day. I know the stages, the process. I can recite the symptoms and timeline like a textbook. But knowing doesn't make it easier. Nothing makes it easier." She was quiet again. Then she did something she had never done before. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the Chicago night. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I feel so tired, Mr. Sullivan. So tired of being strong, of always having hope, when hope feels like a lie we tell ourselves to make dying bearable." She turned back to look at him, though he could not see her face. "Do you know what I think about sometimes? I think about what it would be like to just stop, to stop trying so hard, to stop caring so much, to let go. The words hung in the air like a confession, not suicidal, but honest in a way that was almost more frightening. The admission that even the strongest people sometimes dreamed of rest. But then I come here, Claire continued, and I see you lying so still. And I think he doesn't get to let go. He's trapped in there with no choice but to keep fighting. So who am I to give up when I still have choices? She moved back to the chair and sat down heavily. Thank you for that, she said softly, for reminding me, without saying a word, what courage looks like. Marcus wanted to weep. This woman who thought he was inspiring her had no idea that she was the one giving him courage, that her voice in the darkness was the only thing preventing him from giving up his own charade and either revealing himself or retreating into actual unconsciousness. On the sixth night, Claire fell asleep in the chair beside his bed. Not a brief doze, but deep exhaustion finally claiming its due. Marcus, through supreme effort that left him drained, managed to move his right hand, just slightly, just enough to let his pinky finger brush against her hand, where it rested on the bed rail. Claire's fingers twitched in her sleep, then curled slightly, as if seeking the contact. She did not wake, but some unconscious part of her recognized the connection and held on. They stayed that way until dawn, two people locked in their separate prisons, connected by the smallest possible touch. On the seventh night, Claire arrived with a different energy, quieter, more uncertain. She went through the evening routine without her usual running commentary. When she finally sat down, Marcus could sense her gathering courage for something. Mr. Sullivan, she began, then paused. Marcus, is it all right if I call you Marcus? She waited as if expecting an answer. Marcus focused all his energy and managed to make his heart rate spike slightly. Claire noticed. She leaned forward, watching the monitor closely. Okay, she said slowly. I'm going to try something. If you can hear me, if you understand me, try to make your heart rate increase. Just a little. Marcus did. The monitor showed a clear uptick. Claire's breathing quickened. Now keep it steady for no. Marcus let his heart rate stabilize. Oh my God, Claire whispered. You can hear me. You're aware. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back, her mind clearly racing. Marcus could almost hear her thinking, processing the implications. Then she returned to his bedside and sat down, taking his hand deliberately this time. Marcus, I don't know how long you've been aware. I don't know why you haven't shown anyone else. But I want you to know something. I won't tell anyone without your permission. If you're staying quiet for a reason, if you're protecting yourself, I'll respect that. She squeezed his hand gently. But I need you to know that you're not alone anymore. Whatever you're hiding from, whatever you're afraid of, I'm here. I'll keep you safe. The relief that flooded through Marcus was so intense, it nearly broke his control entirely. He had been discovered, but by someone he could trust. Someone who offered protection rather than exposure. Someone who saw his humanity even in his deception. The monitor showed his heart rate climbing, staying elevated. Claire watched it, understanding dawning across her features. You're afraid of someone, aren't you? Someone who visits here. Heart rate spike? Yes. Your brother? The spike was dramatic, unmistakable. Claire nodded slowly. I thought so. There's something about him that feels wrong. She sat back, her nursing mind clearly working through the implications. If Marcus was faking unconsciousness to protect himself from Derek, revealing his awareness could put him in danger. But keeping the secret meant participating in a deception that violated every medical protocol. Claire made her decision. Then we play it smart. We document everything I see without revealing what you can do. We wait for the right moment. And when the time comes, when you're ready, we make sure you're protected before anyone knows you can respond. She looked at him directly, as if she could see through his closed eyelids to the man inside. You've been so brave, Marcus, lying here, unable to move, unable to speak, pretending for so long. That's a strength most people never need to find. But you don't have to do it completely alone anymore. I'm with you now. However long it takes, whatever happens, I'm with you. In that moment, Marcus Sullivan fell in love. It was not the infatuation of physical attraction, though Claire was lovely in her quiet way. It was not the desperation of a drowning man grasping at a rescuer, though Marcus was certainly desperate. It was something deeper and more fundamental: recognition. The sense of finding someone whose soul resonated at the same frequency as your own. Someone who saw you, truly saw you, and chose to stay anyway. He could not tell her. Not yet. Not while he was still trapped in this prison of flesh and deception. But he promised himself that when he could finally speak, those would be the first words he said to her. Not thank you, though he was grateful beyond measure. Not I'm sorry for deceiving you, though he regretted his necessary lies. Just 3 words. I love you. The night was peaceful after that. Claire stayed awake, alert in a way she had not been before. She sat beside him like a guardian, watching over him with fierce protectiveness. Every time the door opened, every time footsteps approached in the hallway, she was instantly vigilant, ready to protect him from whoever might threaten. Near dawn, she played Claire de Lune again. The music filled the room, beautiful and melancholy. Claire hummed along softly, and Marcus wished with every fiber of his being that he could hum with her, that he could join his voice to hers and create harmony instead of silence. When the morning shift nurse arrived to take over, Claire was reluctant to leave. She gave extensive report, documenting every small detail of the night. Then she lingered by Marcus's bedside, her hand resting briefly on his arm. I'll be back tonight, she promised quietly. Stay strong, stay safe. Then she was gone, and Marcus was left with only the memory of her presence and the certain knowledge that everything had changed. He was no longer alone in his vigil. He had an ally. More than that, he had someone who cared whether he survived. The day passed slowly. Other nurses came and went, performing their duties with professional competence, but none of Claire's warmth. Marcus endured their ministrations and counted the hours until evening when Claire would return. Around 3 in the afternoon, Derek Sullivan arrived. Marcus felt his brother's presence before he heard his voice, that old familiar sense of his brother's energy that came from sharing a childhood. Derek dismissed the day nurse and closed the door behind her, ensuring privacy. Hello, little brother, Derek said, pulling a chair close to the bed. How are we doing today? The question was rhetorical, mocking. Derek had been asking it for 3 months now, his tone shifting gradually from concern to something darker. Today there was an edge to his voice that Marcus had not heard before. The board is getting impatient, Derek continued conversationally. They want certainty. Either you wake up or they need to make permanent arrangements. He paused, and Marcus could hear him shifting in the chair, leaning closer. I told them to give it another month. That was generous of me, don't you think? Derek stood and moved to the window. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reflective. You know what the funny thing is? I never wanted you dead. I just wanted you gone, out of the way. But now, with you like this, I'm starting to see the benefits of the situation. Everything I've always wanted, all the recognition and authority and respect, it's finally mine. And all you had to do was sleep. He turned back toward the bed. So maybe you should stay asleep, Marcus. Maybe that's better for everyone. You don't have to carry all that responsibility anymore. I can do it. I'm actually good at it. Better than you, in some ways. More willing to make the hard choices, more practical. Derek approached the bed again and looked down at his unconscious brother. For a moment, genuine emotion flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps, or sorrow for what might have been. I'm sorry, he said softly. I really am. But this is my time now, and I'm not giving it back. Then he left, and Marcus lay in the aftermath of his brother's words, understanding finally that Derek would never let him wake up. If Marcus revealed his consciousness, Derek would find a way to make sure it was temporary, a medication error, an infection, something deniable but final. Claire had been right to encourage caution. The truth, when it came, would need to be overwhelming and undeniable, and Marcus would need protection that went beyond one compassionate nurse. But at least now he was not facing that truth alone. When Claire returned that evening, he would have her strength added to his own. Together, they would find a way through this darkness. The evening shadows were lengthening across the city when Claire Bennett returned to Suite 801. She entered with her usual quiet competence, but Marcus could sense a new intentionality in her movements. She was not just caring for a patient now. She was protecting someone she had chosen to defend. "Evening, Marcus," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "It's just us again." She performed her usual checks, but this time she narrated differently. Instead of explaining what she was doing to an unconscious patient, she spoke to him as a partner in his own care. "Your vitals look good. Heart rate a bit elevated earlier this afternoon. Was that because of a visitor?" Marcus raised his heart rate deliberately. Claire nodded, understanding. She made notes in the chart, but Marcus suspected she was also keeping a private record of what was really happening. Documentation that might someday prove useful. "I've been thinking all day about how to keep you safe," she said as she prepared his evening care. "We need evidence of what your brother did. We need proof that will stand up to scrutiny, and we need it before anyone knows you're aware." She paused in her work and looked at him directly. "I know you can't tell me everything, but if there's anything you've observed, anything that might help, we need to figure out a way for you to communicate it." She sat down and pulled out a notepad. "I'm going to try something. I'll go through the alphabet. When I hit a letter you need, increase your heart rate. We'll spell things out. It'll be slow, but it might work." For the next 2 hours, they painstakingly developed a communication system. It was exhausting for Marcus, each deliberate manipulation of his heart rate requiring immense concentration. But by the time they finished, they had spelled out 3 crucial words. "Brake records falsified." Claire stared at the words she had written down. "So he did sabotage your car. We need to find those records. Where would they be?" They went back to their laborious spelling. Marcus directed her to his personal tablet, which should still be in the hospital's property storage. His assistant had remote access to his company files. If Claire could retrieve the tablet, they might find the evidence they needed. "But we have to be careful," Claire said. "If Derek finds out we have access to your files, he'll know something is wrong." She thought for a moment, then made a decision. "I'll talk to Dr. Harris tomorrow. Not about you being aware, not yet, but about getting your personal effects returned to the room. It's reasonable that a patient might respond to familiar objects. No one will question it." Marcus felt his tension ease slightly. Claire was not just compassionate, she was smart and strategic. With her help, he might actually survive this. They worked through the night, Claire caring for Marcus's physical needs, while they plotted together in their strange, patient manner. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with the bodily care she provided. It was the intimacy of shared purpose, of trust built in the smallest gestures and the hardest choices. As dawn approached, Claire made one final note in the chart and set it aside. Then she did something unprecedented. She pulled her chair right beside the bed and took Marcus's hand in both of hers. "I need to tell you something and I don't know if I should, but I'm going to anyway because keeping silent feels like another kind of lie." She took a breath. "These past 7 nights, sitting here with you, talking to you, learning that you're aware and conscious and fighting so hard, I've started to feel something I didn't expect. Something that probably breaks every professional boundary, but I don't know how to stop it." Marcus's heart rate began to climb without his conscious direction. "I care about you, Marcus Sullivan. Not just as a patient, not just as someone I'm trying to protect. I care about you as a person. I want to know what you think about things, what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night. I want to hear your voice. I want to see you look at me with awareness in your eyes instead of this terrible stillness." Her hands tightened on his. "And I know that's probably foolish. You're trapped right now, and I'm the only person helping you. So maybe what you feel back is just gratitude. Maybe when you can finally speak, you'll tell me you appreciate my care, but nothing more. And that would be okay. That would be enough. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest about this one thing in a situation that's built entirely on deception." She fell silent, and Marcus screamed internally because there was no way to tell her that he felt the same, that her confession had not been one-sided, that every moment of connection had been mutual, even if only one of them could speak. All he could do was raise his heart rate as high as he dared without triggering alarms, holding it there, hoping she would understand this desperate signal for what it was. Agreement, reciprocation, love. Claire watched the monitor, and a slow smile spread across her face. The smile of someone who had spoken into darkness and heard an echo return. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, then we both know. And when you can finally tell me yourself, I'll be waiting." She stayed beside him, holding his hand. until the morning shift arrived and she had to surrender him to another day of pretending. But as she left, she looked back one last time, and Marcus felt her gaze like a physical touch. "Tonight," she said. "I'll be back tonight." And Marcus, trapped in his prison of silence, counted every minute until she would return. The memories came to Marcus in the dark hours when Claire was not there, surfacing like bodies from a deep lake. Unwanted but undeniable. His childhood with Derek had not always been a war. There had been a time, brief but real, when they had been brothers in more than blood. Their mother, Catherine, had been the center of their world. She was the kind of woman who made a house feel like home simply by existing in it. Warm cookies on winter afternoons, stories read in voices that brought characters to life, laughter that filled rooms, and made even their stern father smile. She had loved both her sons with a fierceness that knew no favoritism. And under her care, the two boys had been genuinely close. Marcus remembered being 8 years old, small for his age and prone to nightmares. Derek had been 11, already showing signs of the height and strength he would carry into adulthood. On the nights when Marcus woke screaming from dreams he could not explain, it was Derek who came to his room. Derek who sat on the edge of the bed and told him stories about brave knights and clever dragons until the fear receded. Derek, who promised that nothing bad would ever happen because big brothers were meant to protect little brothers. And that was a promise Derek intended to keep. Then their mother got sick. It happened fast, the way cancer sometimes does. 1 month she was fine, vibrant, whole. The next month she was fading, and by the 3rd month she was dying in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. The doctors used words like aggressive and metastatic and palliative care, but what those words meant was simple. Catherine Sullivan was leaving, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop her. Marcus had been too young to fully understand. He knew his mother was sick, knew that the hospital visits were serious, but some part of him believed she would get better because mothers did not die. That was not how the world worked. Derek understood. At 11, he was old enough to grasp what was coming, and the knowledge aged him in ways that would never fully heal. Marcus could still remember the night their mother died. The way Derek had held him in the hospital waiting room while their father stood at the window with his back to both sons, shoulders shaking with silent grief. "We only have each other now," Derek had whispered into Marcus's hair. "You and me. We have to take care of each other." And for a while, Derek had tried. In the terrible months after their mother's death, when their father retreated into work and left 2 boys to navigate grief alone, Derek had stepped into the gap. He made Marcus breakfast before school. He helped with homework. He attended parent-teacher conferences when their father could not be bothered. At 11 years old, Derek Sullivan had tried to be both brother and parent, and the weight of that responsibility had been crushing. The fracture started small, a science fair in 6th grade for Derek, 3rd grade for Marcus. Derek had worked on his project for weeks, building an elaborate model of the solar system with working motors to make the planet's orbit. It was clever and careful, the product of real effort. Marcus had thrown his project together in 2 days. A simple demonstration of photosynthesis using bean plants and different colored lights. He had not even particularly cared about winning. He just liked watching things grow. Derek's project took 3rd place. Marcus's won 1st. Their father, Robert, had attended the ceremony, one of his rare appearances at a school event. When Marcus's name was called, Robert had stood and applauded with genuine pride. When Derek's name was announced, Robert had barely looked up from his phone. At dinner that night, Robert had displayed Marcus's blue ribbon on the mantel and talked about how his youngest son was clearly brilliant, destined for great things. Derek's white ribbon stayed in his backpack, never mentioned. Marcus could still remember the look on his brother's face. Not anger, not yet. Just confusion and hurt. The expression of a child trying to understand why his best had not been good enough. The pattern repeated, and repeated, and repeated. High school brought athletic competitions where Marcus made varsity teams without trying, while Derek fought for junior varsity positions. Academic awards where Marcus collected honors while Derek struggled to maintain a B average. College acceptances where Marcus had his choice of elite schools while Derek received only rejections. Through all of it, their father's message was clear and constant. Marcus was exceptional. Derek was not. Marcus had never wanted this division. He had tried, in his teenage awkwardness, to bridge the gap. He had offered to help Derek study. He had suggested they work on projects together. He had even once asked their father to pay more attention to Derek's accomplishments. Robert had looked at him with incomprehension. Why would I praise mediocrity? Your brother needs to learn that effort without results is meaningless. Maybe if he worked as hard as you, he would achieve something worth recognizing. Marcus had been 15 when that conversation happened. Old enough to know his father was wrong, but not old enough to know how to change his mind. So he had stopped trying, and the distance between the brothers had grown. By the time their father died 2 years ago, the gap had become a chasm. Robert's will had made it official. The company, the authority, the legacy, it all went to Marcus. Derek received a minority stake and a position as vice president, but everyone knew it was ceremonial. He was the brother who worked for the brother who mattered. At the will reading, Derek had not argued or protested. He had simply sat in his chair, perfectly still, while the lawyer detailed exactly how little their father had valued him. And when Marcus had tried to speak to him afterward, tried to say they could share the leadership, that it did not have to be this way, Derek had looked at him with eyes that held no love, no hope, nothing but exhausted resignation. You still do not understand, Derek had said quietly. You have never understood. This is not about the company or the money or the power. This is about being seen, and I have spent my entire life being invisible while you blaze like the sun. I am done, Marcus. I am just done. Now, trapped in his hospital bed with Derek's confession of sabotage echoing in his memory, Marcus finally understood what his brother had meant. Derek had not wanted Marcus dead. He had wanted Marcus gone. Wanted the blinding light that had cast Derek in shadow for 32 years to finally be extinguished so Derek could have one moment, just one, of being the son who mattered. The understanding brought no comfort. Intent might matter philosophically, but the brake lines had still been cut. The car had still crashed. Marcus had still nearly died. And Derek had still chosen violence over every other possible solution. What haunted Marcus most was the question he could not answer. Had there been a moment when he could have prevented this? A conversation he should have had? A gesture he should have made? Could he have loved his brother better, seen his pain more clearly, shared his privilege more generously? Or had the damage been done too early, too deep, too completely for any adult intervention to repair? These thoughts circled through his mind during the long hours when Claire was gone. But when she returned each evening, when her voice filled his room with warmth, and her presence reminded him that connection was still possible, the darkness receded. She became his reason to fight. Not revenge against Derek, not reclaiming his company, but the simple, profound desire to speak to this woman who had chosen to sit with him in his silence. Claire's mother was fading. It was not dramatic, no sudden crisis that brought the narrative of her death into sharp focus. Instead, Elena Bennett was simply eroding, the way a cliff face erodes under constant assault from the sea. Each day she was a little weaker, a little thinner, a little more translucent, as if she were slowly becoming a ghost in preparation for actually becoming one. Claire watched it happen with the trained eye of a nurse and the breaking heart of a daughter. She knew the signs, could track the progression, understood with clinical precision how much time remained. That knowledge was both a blessing and a curse. She could prepare, could say the things that needed saying, could ensure her mother's comfort, but she could not unknow what was coming, could not pretend that maybe the doctors were wrong, that maybe a miracle would intervene. On Tuesday morning, 9 days after Marcus had revealed his consciousness to Claire, Elena could not get out of bed. Not because the pain was too intense, though there was always pain now despite the morphine, but because her body had simply stopped cooperating with her will. The muscles would not obey. The bones would not bear weight. Claire called in sick to her day shift and stayed home. She moved Elena's hospital bed to face the window, so her mother could watch the autumn light move across the small garden they had planted together in spring. Tomatoes gone to frost, roses dropping their last petals, the whole world preparing for winter. They did not talk much. Words had become difficult for Elena, each sentence requiring breath she could no longer spare. Instead, They sat in companionable silence, Claire holding her mother's hand, both women watching the light change. In the afternoon, Elena stirred and turned her head to look at her daughter. "Tell me about your patient," she whispered. "The one you care about." Claire hesitated, then decided her mother deserved the truth. She told Elena everything, about Marcus's consciousness, about Derek's sabotage, about the strange communication they had developed, about feelings that should not exist between a nurse and her patient but existed anyway. Elena listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled, just slightly. "Your father was in a coma for 2 weeks before he died. You remember?" Claire nodded. "Everyone said he could not hear us. But I talked to him anyway. Read to him, told him stories about you, and how proud he would be of the woman you were becoming. And you know what I think? I think he heard every word. I think in those last days, when he could not speak or move or show me he was there, we were closer than we had ever been, because words could not get in the way anymore. Only truth could pass between us." She paused to gather strength for more words. "What you have with this man, this Marcus, it is not foolish. It is the purest kind of connection. You have seen him at his most vulnerable and chosen to protect him. He has heard you at your most honest and chosen to trust you. That is love, Claire. Maybe not the kind of love that poets write about, but real love, the kind that matters." "Mama, I am scared," Claire admitted. "Scared of what happens when he can finally speak. Scared he will not be the person I think he is. Scared I have built something beautiful in my head that has nothing to do with reality." Elena squeezed her daughter's hand with surprising strength. "Then you will deal with reality. But baby girl, you cannot hide from possibilities because they might hurt. That is not living, that is just waiting to die." She closed her eyes, exhausted from the conversation. "When your father was dying, I made him a promise. I promised I would make sure you knew how to live, not just how to survive. So I am telling you now, take the risk. Love this man. Let him love you back. And if it all falls apart, then at least you will have tried." Claire sat with those words long after her mother fell asleep. Take the risk. She had been taking risks her whole life. Risks with her career, her finances, her future. But this felt different. This felt like risking the part of herself she had protected most carefully, her heart. That evening, when Claire returned to the hospital for her night shift, she carried her mother's words with her like a talisman. Marcus knew the moment Claire entered his room that something had changed. Her footsteps were slower. Her breathing was different. When she began her evening routine, her hands moved with the same competence, but less certainty. Bad day? She is worse, Marcus thought. Her mother is dying faster than expected. He wished desperately that he could offer comfort beyond his silent presence. But Claire seemed to draw strength from that presence, regardless. She worked in near silence for the first hour, performing her duties with mechanical precision. Then she sat in her chair and finally looked at him directly. "My mother could not get out of bed today. The hospice nurse says we are looking at days now, not weeks." Her voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the grief beneath the steadiness. "I always knew this was coming. I have known for 2 years since the diagnosis. But knowing and accepting are not the same thing." She fell silent, and Marcus did the only thing he could. He raised his heart rate, holding it elevated, the signal they had developed for "I am here. I am listening. You are not alone." Claire noticed and gave him a small, sad smile. "Thank you. I do not know what I would do without you to talk to. Everyone else wants me to be strong, to have processed this, to be at peace with it. But you let me be exactly as broken as I feel." She reached out and took his hand, a gesture that had become familiar between them. "My mother told me something today, about my father, about love, about taking risks. She said I should not be afraid of what might happen between us when you can finally speak. That if it falls apart, at least I will have tried." Claire's thumb traced circles on the back of Marcus's hand. "So I am not going to be afraid anymore. I am not going to hold back or protect myself or pretend these feelings are anything other than what they are. I love you, Marcus Sullivan. I love your courage and your patience and the way you have listened to my heart without being able to say a single word in return. And when you can finally tell me how you feel, Whether it is the same or whether it is gratitude or whether it is nothing at all, I will accept that truth, but I will not lie about my own truth anymore. Marcus wanted to weep with frustration. Here was this extraordinary woman offering him everything, and he could not even tell her that he loved her back. All he could do was maintain his elevated heart rate and hope she understood that the monitor was screaming what his voice could not. Claire watched the display. An understanding dawned across her face. You feel the same way? Your heart is telling me what your voice cannot. She leaned forward and did something she had never done before. She pressed her forehead gently against his, a gesture of intimacy that transcended the physical. Then we will wait together. And when the time comes, when you can finally speak, we will figure out what this means and where it goes. But for now, this is enough. You being here, me being here, both of us knowing. They stayed that way for a long moment, breathing the same air, existing in the same small space of profound connection. Then Claire pulled back and resumed her professional duties. But something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer nurse and patient, playing at being more. They were two people who loved each other, trapped in circumstances that prevented them from expressing that love fully, but no longer denying its existence. The rest of the week passed in a strange suspension of time. Elena continued her slow fade. Marcus continued his silent vigil. Claire moved between them, caring for both, loved by both, helpless to save either. On Thursday night, Claire brought a different kind of question to Marcus. I need to figure out how to communicate with you more efficiently. The heart rate system works, but it is slow and limited. We need something better. She thought for a moment, then pulled out a notepad. What if we develop a more complex code? Different patterns mean different things. One spike for yes, sustained elevation for no, two spikes for danger. We can build a whole vocabulary of signals. They spent the next 2 hours developing their system. It was exhausting for Marcus, each intentional manipulation of his autonomic nervous system requiring immense concentration. But by the time they finished, they had established basic communication. Yes, no, danger. Derek, records, proof. Wait, the last one was the hardest. Wait, because every instinct Marcus possessed was screaming to reveal himself, to end this charade, to speak and move and take action. But Claire counseled patience. If Derek knows you are aware before we have proof, you are in danger, real danger. We need evidence that is overwhelming and undeniable. And we need a plan to protect you the moment we reveal your consciousness. She was right and Marcus knew it, but the waiting was agony. On Friday afternoon, Derek made another visit. He dismissed the day nurse with casual authority and closed the door behind her. Then he stood at the window for a long time, not speaking, just looking out at the city. When he finally turned to face Marcus, his expression was unreadable. The board voted today. 3 more months. That is what I bought you, little brother. 3 more months of this peaceful sleep before they make me pull the plug on extraordinary measures. He moved closer to the bed. I wonder sometimes if you can hear me. If somewhere in that broken brain of yours you are aware and screaming. I hope not. I hope you are truly gone, somewhere peaceful, somewhere without pain or pressure or expectations. Derek sat in the chair Claire usually occupied, and for a moment, his carefully controlled facade cracked. Do you know what it has been like? Being your brother, being the one who had to watch you succeed at everything while I failed at everything? Even when I worked twice as hard, even when I sacrificed sleep and health and any semblance of a personal life, it was never enough. You were always better, always smarter, always Dad's favorite. His voice was raw now, the bitterness of decades finally finding expression. And the worst part is you were never even arrogant about it. You were humble and kind and generous, which somehow made it worse, because I could not even hate you cleanly. I had to hate myself for resenting you. He stood abruptly and moved back to the window. I should not have cut the brakes. I know that. It was wrong, and I will carry that guilt forever. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I did not want you dead. I wanted you human, fallible, capable of failure like the rest of us. I wanted Dad to finally see that you were not perfect, that you could be hurt and broken and helpless. He laughed, a sound without humor. Ironic, is not it? I tried to humanize you, and instead I turned myself into a monster. Derek left without saying goodbye, and Marcus lay in the aftermath of his brother's confession, feeling something unexpected. Not rage or hatred, but profound sadness. His brother was right. Marcus had been blind to Derek's pain, blind to the cost of being the golden child in a family where love was conditional on achievement. That did not excuse attempted murder, but it explained it. An explanation, Marcus was learning, was the first step toward understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never, but understanding. When Claire arrived that evening and Marcus signaled that Derek had visited, that there had been a confession, she made notes in her private log. Evidence was accumulating. The truth was coming into focus. Soon, they would have enough to act. But not yet. For now, they waited. Saturday morning brought the crisis Claire had been dreading. She arrived home at 9 after her night shift to find Mrs. Chen from next door waiting at the apartment door, her face pale. "Claire, I am so sorry. Your mother—" She stopped breathing. "The ambulance is on the way." Claire ran into the apartment and found Elena unconscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. The hospice nurse had warned this would happen, the moment when the body began the final shutdown. But knowing it was coming did not make it easier when it arrived. The ambulance came quickly. The paramedics were efficient and kind. At the hospital, doctors explained what Claire already understood. Her mother was dying, hours at most. They could make her comfortable, keep her pain-free, but they could not stop what was happening. Claire called the hospital where she worked and told them she could not come in. Dr. Harris told her to take all the time she needed. Then Claire settled into the chair beside her mother's bed and prepared to say goodbye. Elena woke once in the afternoon. Her eyes focused on Claire with effort, but when they did, recognition and love shone clear. "You are here," she whispered. "Always, Mama. I am always here." Elena's hand found Claire's and held on weakly. "Your patient. Marcus, you will go back to him tonight?" "Mama, no, I am staying with you." Elena shook her head slightly. "He needs you, and you need him. Do not let me keep you from living." Claire started to protest, but Elena cut her off with surprising firmness. "Claire Marie Bennett, you listen to me. I have had a good life. A hard life sometimes. But good. I married a man I loved. I raised a daughter I am proud of. I have known joy and purpose and meaning. That is more than many people get." She paused for breath. "But you, baby girl, you have given up so much. Your dreams, your youth, your chances at your own happiness. You have sacrificed everything to take care of others. And I will not let my dying be one more thing you sacrifice for." Tears streamed down Claire's face. "Go to him tonight. Be with him. Let him give you what I cannot anymore. Let him be your reason to keep living after I am gone." "Mama, please." Elena squeezed her hand one last time. "I love you, Claire. I have loved you from the moment you were born, and loving you has been the greatest joy of my life. Do not waste that gift. Do not waste your life on grief when you could spend it on love." She closed her eyes, exhausted. The monitor showed her heart rate slowing, her breathing becoming more irregular. Claire stayed beside her for hours, holding her hand, whispering prayers and memories and gratitude. As the sun set outside the hospital window, Elena's breathing became shallower, the pauses between breaths growing longer. At 7:38 that evening, Elena Bennett took one last breath and did not take another. Claire sat in the silence that followed, still holding her mother's hand, feeling the warmth slowly leave the skin. She did not cry, not yet. The tears would come later. For now, she simply sat with the woman who had given her life and taught her how to live it. At 8:15, a nurse came in to check on them. She saw immediately what had happened and placed a gentle hand on Claire's shoulder. "I'm so sorry. Take all the time you need." Claire nodded. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She stood, kissed her mother's forehead one last time, and left the room. She drove through the city in a daze, operating on autopilot. She did not go home to her empty apartment. She went to Memorial Heights Hospital. She went to Suite 801. She went to Marcus. When she entered his room, it was nearly 9, the start of her usual shift. The day nurse looked up in surprise. "Claire, I heard about your mother. You should not be here." Claire shook her head. "I need to be here. Please, let me stay with him tonight." The nurse looked uncertain, but nodded. She finished her notes and left, closing the door softly behind her. Claire stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, not moving, not speaking. Then she walked to Marcus's bedside and looked down at him. "She died," Claire said, her voice flat and distant. "An hour ago. My mother is gone." Marcus felt his heart shatter. He raised his heart rate, spiked it, held it elevated as high as he dared. The monitor began to beep urgently. Claire looked at it, then at him, and something in her face crumbled. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "How to keep going. How to wake up tomorrow and the day after that without her. She was my North Star, Marcus. She was the reason I became a nurse, the reason I believed caring for people mattered. And now she is gone, and I feel like I am falling through empty space with nothing to hold on to." She sat heavily in her chair and put her head in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Marcus concentrated with every fiber of his being and managed something he had not been able to do since the accident. He moved his hand. Not much, just a few inches across the blanket, but enough. His fingers touched Claire's arm. She jerked upright, staring at his hand, then at his face, then back at his hand. "Marcus," she breathed. "You moved. You actually moved." He could not move again, not immediately. That small gesture had drained him completely, but it had been enough. Claire took his hand in both of hers and held on as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for reminding me that I am not alone." She stayed beside him through the night, sometimes crying, sometimes silent, sometimes talking about her mother and all the things Elena had taught her. Marcus listened to every word, held her hand as firmly as his limited control allowed, and wished with everything he possessed that he could wake up right now and hold her properly. But he could not yet. So instead, he did what he had been doing for months. He was present, he listened. He bore witness to her grief without trying to fix it or minimize it or rush her through it. And somewhere in those dark hours, as Claire's tears finally slowed and exhaustion began to claim her, she fell asleep with her head resting on the edge of his bed, her hand still holding his. Marcus lay awake, watching her sleep, feeling her breath against his arm, and made a silent vow. When he could finally speak, when he could finally move freely, when he could finally be the man rather than the patient, he would spend the rest of his life making sure Claire Bennett never felt alone again, because she had saved him. Not just from Derek's plot, not just from the isolation of his silent imprisonment, but from the cold, empty existence he had been living before the accident. She had taught him what it meant to truly connect with another human being. She had shown him that vulnerability was not weakness, but the only path to real strength. He loved her. And love, he was learning, was not about grand gestures or perfect words. It was about showing up, about being present, about holding on when letting go would be easier. Claire had taught him that, and now it was his turn to teach her the same lesson. The night passed slowly. Claire woke several times, disoriented, then remembered where she was and why. Each time, Marcus made sure to spike his heart rate, the signal that meant "I am here. You are not alone." By dawn, Claire had cried herself empty. She sat up, wiped her eyes, and looked at Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. I should go home, make arrangements, call people, do all the things you do when someone dies. But she did not move. She just sat there, holding his hand. "My mother's last words to me were to come here, to be with you, to not waste my life on grief when I could spend it on love." She released his hand and stood, moving to the window where morning light was beginning to gray the sky. "I do not know how to do that yet, how to choose love over grief, but I am going to try, for her, for you, for myself." She turned back to face him. "Dr. Harris will be making rounds soon. I need to tell her about my mother, arrange time off, and we need to figure out our next steps with Derek. We cannot wait much longer. The board gave him 3 more months, but I do not trust him to wait that long if he suspects anything." Marcus agreed, signaling with his heart rate. Claire nodded, understanding. "Okay, we move carefully, but we move soon. I will talk to Dr. Harris today, not about everything, not yet, but about getting you more intensive therapy, about pushing for improvement. If we can get you to the point where you can show voluntary movement consistently, we can reveal your awareness safely, with medical staff present, with documentation, with protection. She came back to the bedside and leaned down close. "Hold on a little longer, Marcus. I know you have been trapped in silence for so long, but we are almost there. Almost to the point where you can speak and I can hear you and we can figure out what this is between us." She kissed his forehead gently, a benediction. "I will be back tonight, and every night after, until you wake up for real." Then she was gone, and Marcus was left alone with the morning and the knowledge that everything was about to change. The waiting was almost over. Soon he would have to face the world again, face his brother, face the consequences of his deception. But most importantly, he would finally be able to face Claire as an equal, to tell her with words what he had been trying to communicate for months, to offer her not just his gratitude, but his future. If she would have him, if she could forgive the lies he had told by remaining silent, if love built in darkness could survive being brought into the light. Those were questions only time would answer. But as Marcus lay in his hospital bed, feeling the ghost of Claire's kiss on his forehead and the lingering warmth of her hand in his, he allowed himself something he had not felt in months: hope. The day passed in slow increments. Nurses came and went. Physical therapists put him through passive range of motion exercises. Derek did not visit, which was both a relief and a concern. Was his brother backing off, or planning something worse? Marcus used the solitude to practice. Small movements at first, flexing a finger, curling a toe. Each tiny gesture required immense concentration. But he was regaining control. His body was finally remembering how to obey his mind. By the time evening arrived and Claire returned, Marcus had managed to move 3 fingers on his right hand and both feet. It was not much, but it was progress. But Claire noticed immediately when she began her assessment. "Your reflexes are stronger. Significantly stronger." She looked at him with barely contained excitement. "You are coming back. Really coming back." She ran more tests, documenting everything meticulously. Then she sat down and pulled her chair close. "I talked to Dr. Harris today about everything, about you being conscious, about Derek, about needing protection. When we reveal your awareness." She did not want to believe it at first, but I showed her the patterns in your heart rate, the responses that were too consistent to be random. She believes me now. Claire took a breath. "She is going to arrange a controlled awakening, day after tomorrow, Sunday morning. We will have security present, medical staff as witnesses, and a plan to keep you safe from Derek until we have proof to give the police. Dr. Harris is contacting your company's board directly, people she trusts. They will be there too." Marcus felt adrenaline surge through him. 2 days. In 2 days, his imprisonment would end. "Are you ready for this?" Claire asked softly. "Because once we do this, there is no going back. Your life will never be private again. Every decision you have made, including the decision to fake deep coma, will be scrutinized. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus signaled yes without hesitation. Claire smiled. "Then we do this, together. And whatever comes after, we face it together too." She stayed with him through the night, not as a nurse now, but as a partner in what was about to unfold. They did not talk much. Words seemed unnecessary. Instead, they simply existed in the same space, drawing strength from each other's presence. As dawn approached on Saturday, Claire made one final promise. "Tomorrow night will be our last night like this. Just you and me, nurse and patient, speaking in codes and silences. And then Sunday you wake up for real. You speak. And we find out if what we built in the darkness can survive the light." She leaned close and whispered near his ear. "I believe it can. I believe in us. Do you?" Marcus raised his heart rate and held it there, steady and strong. Claire smiled through tears. "Good. Then let us finish this. Together." Saturday morning arrived with the weight of what was coming. Claire had not slept after leaving Marcus at dawn. Instead, she had gone to her apartment and begun the grim work of dismantling her mother's life, calling the funeral home, notifying relatives, sorting through papers and photographs and all the small artifacts that comprised a human existence. The apartment felt impossibly empty without Elena in it. Her hospital bed still stood by the window, sheets pulled tight, waiting for an occupant who would never return. Claire could not bring herself to call the medical supply company to have it picked up. Not yet. The bed was proof her mother had existed, had been here, had mattered. Removing it would make Elena's absence too final. By noon, Claire had made the necessary calls and arrangements. The funeral would be Tuesday. Simple service, small gathering. Elena had not wanted anything elaborate. She had lived modestly and wanted to exit the same way. Claire sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and thought about what her mother had said in those final hours. Do not waste your life on grief when you could spend it on love. The words echoed with the weight of last instructions, the kind of guidance that could not be ignored because the giver would never have another chance to offer it. Claire had spent so much of her life caring for the dying, her father, her patients, her mother. She knew grief intimately, understood its stages and rhythms, could counsel others through its darkness. But knowing the map of grief did not make the journey easier. She felt hollowed out, scraped clean, emptied of everything except a dull ache that sat in her chest like a stone. And yet, beneath the grief, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the overwhelming sense of loss, there was something else, a small seed of something that might, given time and care, grow into hope. Marcus. Tomorrow he would wake. Tomorrow she would hear his voice for the first time in their conscious relationship. Tomorrow they would face each other as equals, rather than as nurse and patient, caregiver and cared for. Tomorrow everything would change. The question that haunted her was simple and terrible. What if the man who woke up was not the man she had fallen in love with? She had constructed Marcus in her mind from fragments, his responses to music, the patterns of his heart rate, the small movements he had managed, the silence he had maintained for so long. From these pieces, she had built an image of who he must be: patient, courageous, thoughtful, kind. But what if she was wrong? What if the real Marcus Sullivan, the one who could speak and move and make his own choices, was someone else entirely? A corporate executive who had spent months listening to her pour out her heart and had simply been too polite in his paralyzed way to tell her to stop. The doubt gnawed at her, but her mother's words pushed back against it. Take the risk. Love requires faith. Not the naive faith that everything would work out perfectly, but the mature faith that even if it fell apart, the trying would have been worth it. Claire finished her cold coffee and stood. She needed to shower, eat something, maybe sleep for a few hours. Tomorrow would be long and difficult, and would require all her strength. Tonight would be her last shift with Marcus as he was now, silent, still, known only through the language they had created together. After tomorrow, he would be himself again, and they would discover whether the connection they had built in darkness could survive being exposed to light. The hospital felt different when Claire returned that evening, or perhaps she was the one who felt different. Grief and anticipation mixed in her bloodstream like competing drugs, leaving her alert but unsteady, focused but fragile. She found Dr. Harris waiting outside Suite 801. Claire, the doctor said gently, I am so sorry about your mother. Thank you. You should not be working tonight. You should be home, resting, processing. Claire shook her head. I need to be here. With him, one more night before everything changes. Dr. Harris studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I understand. But Claire, you need to prepare yourself. When Marcus wakes tomorrow, the dynamic between you will shift. He will no longer be your patient. You will no longer be his nurse. The boundaries that have protected you both will disappear. I know. Do you? Because Claire, I have seen you with him. I know what you feel. And I am worried about what happens when reality does not match the fantasy you have built. It is not a fantasy, Claire said quietly. It is real. What we have, it is real. Then prove me wrong. Dr. Harris smiled slightly. I would be happy to be wrong about this. She handed Claire a file. This is the protocol for tomorrow. We begin at 7 in the morning. Security will be positioned outside. Board members will arrive at 7:30. We will attempt gradual awakening, reduce any remaining sedatives, increase stimulation. If Marcus is truly conscious as you believe, he should be able to demonstrate voluntary responses fairly quickly. And Derek? We notify him after Marcus is fully awake and surrounded by witnesses, not before. I will not give his brother any opportunity to interfere or harm him. Claire took the file and nodded her thanks. Then she entered Suite 801 for what would be the last time as things stood now. Marcus was waiting. She could sense it the moment she crossed the threshold. His presence felt different tonight, more concentrated, as if he were gathering himself for what was coming. "Hello, Marcus," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "Last night like this. Tomorrow everything changes." She began her evening routine, but tonight she narrated differently, not explaining her actions, but sharing her thoughts. "I buried my mother today. Well, arranged to bury her. The funeral is Tuesday. I wish you could be there, but I understand that might not be possible. Depending on how tomorrow goes, you might not be in any shape to attend a funeral for a woman you never met." She checked his vitals, made notes. "My mother believed in you, in us. She told me to take the risk, to not waste my life on grief when I could spend it on love. I think she would have liked you, Marcus. You both had that same quality of being fully present, of listening not just with your ears, but with your whole attention." Claire sat in her usual chair and looked at him directly. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear this. Tomorrow when you wake up, I will be happy, grateful, relieved, but I will also be terrified. Because right now, in this moment, I know you. I understand you. We have our language, our connection, our way of being together. Tomorrow all of that changes. Tomorrow you become fully yourself again. And I have to trust that the man you are is someone I can still love." She reached for his hand. "I am not asking you to be perfect. I am not expecting some fairy tale romance where everything is easy and beautiful. I know life does not work that way. But I am asking you to be honest with me. When you can finally speak, tell me the truth. If these months have meant something to you, tell me. If they have not, tell me that too. I can handle heartbreak. What I cannot handle is pretense." Marcus responded with his heart rate, the rapid elevation that meant, "Yes, I understand. I am here with you." Claire smiled through the tears that had started to fall. "Good. Then let us get through this night. Let us be together one more time in the way we have been, before we have to figure out what comes next." She stayed beside him through the long hours, not sleeping, not really resting, just existing in shared space. They had developed such comfort with silence. Most people felt compelled to fill quiet with noise, but Claire and Marcus had learned that silence could be its own form of communication. Presence did not require constant words. Around midnight, Claire began to talk about her father. She had mentioned him before, but tonight she went deeper, sharing memories she rarely voiced. "He was a quiet man, my dad. Worked construction his whole adult life. Never finished high school, but he was smart in the way that mattered. He could fix anything, build anything, solve problems that engineers with degrees could not crack. And he loved my mother with this fierce, uncomplicated devotion that made you believe love was real and worthwhile and worth fighting for." She paused, remembering. "When he had his stroke, when he ended up in that hospital bed, unable to speak or move, my mother never left his side. She talked to him constantly, read to him, told him stories, held his hand. The nurses said it was pointless, that he could not hear, that she was wasting her time. But she did not care. She said love was not conditional on response. Love was showing up, being present, choosing to stay." Claire looked at Marcus. "That is what you taught me too. That love is not about grand gestures or perfect words. It is about being there, about holding on, about choosing someone even when, especially when, they cannot choose you back." She squeezed his hand gently. "So tomorrow, when you wake up, when you can choose for yourself again, I want you to know that I have already chosen you. I chose you weeks ago. And that choice stands regardless of what you choose in return." The monitors beeped softly in the background. The city lights glowed through the windows. Two people existed in a space carved out of time, neither past nor future, but simply present, simply now. As dawn began to gray the windows, Claire finally spoke the words she had been holding back. "I love you, Marcus Sullivan. I love your courage and your patience, and the way you have borne this impossible burden without breaking. I love the man I believe you are. Tomorrow I will find out if I am right. But tonight, this moment, I love you completely." Marcus focused every ounce of will he possessed and managed to move his hand. Not much, just enough to close his fingers around hers. It was the clearest signal he had ever given, and it meant everything his voice could not yet say. Claire felt his grip and began to cry. Not sad tears, but the kind that came from feeling too much to contain. Relief and grief and love and fear all mixed together until they overflowed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for waiting." They stayed that way until full morning arrived, and it was time to begin. At 6:30, Claire helped Marcus through his morning care routine one last time. She was gentle but efficient, treating him with the same dignity she always had, but knowing this was the last time she would perform these intimate tasks for him as his nurse. By 7, Dr. Harris arrived with 2 nurses Claire did not recognize. Behind them came hospital security, 2 men who positioned themselves just outside the door. The room suddenly felt crowded, clinical, official. "Good morning, Marcus," Dr. Harris said, approaching the bed. "Today we are going to try something different. We are going to attempt to facilitate a fuller awakening. If you can hear me, if you can understand me, we need you to try to show us. Can you blink your eyes?" For the first time in 3 months, Marcus allowed himself to respond obviously. He opened his eyes. The room went absolutely still. Marcus blinked once, twice. His eyes were unfocused at first, pupils adjusting to light after so long in artificial darkness. But they were open and moving and clearly responsive. "My God," one of the nurses breathed. Dr. Harris leaned closer, pulling a pen light from her pocket. "Marcus, I am going to shine this light in your eyes. It might be uncomfortable, but I need you to track the movement if you can." She moved the light slowly from side to side. Marcus's eyes followed it. Dr. Harris straightened and looked at Claire. "You were right. He is fully conscious." The next hour was a blur of medical assessments, testing his reflexes, measuring his responses, documenting every small movement. Marcus cooperated fully, demonstrating that he could move his fingers, his toes, his head slightly from side to side. The movements were weak from months of disuse, but they were intentional and controlled. At 7:45, 3 men in expensive suits arrived, board members from Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, summoned by Dr. Harris. They stood at the back of the room, watching with expressions that ranged from shock to calculation. "Marcus," Dr. Harris said, "we are going to try to help you sit up. It might be difficult, your muscles have atrophied, but we need to get you more upright to help with the next phase." With help from 2 nurses and Claire, they slowly raised the head of the bed and supported Marcus with pillows. The change in position after so long horizontal was disorienting. The room swayed. Marcus closed his eyes and focused on not passing out. When he opened his eyes again, the first thing he saw clearly was Claire. She stood slightly apart from the medical team, watching him with an expression he could not fully read. Hope and fear mixed together, waiting to see who he would be now that he could be himself again. Marcus tried to speak. His throat was dry, his vocal cords unused. What came out was barely a whisper, more breath than sound. A nurse quickly offered water through a straw. Marcus drank carefully, letting the moisture ease his throat. Then he tried again. "Claire," her name. His first word in 3 months was her name. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Yes," Claire said, stepping closer. "I am here." Marcus's eyes focused on her face, really seeing her for the first time without pretending blindness. She was not classically beautiful, but there was something in her features that made beautiful seem inadequate. Strength and gentleness combined, sorrow and hope existing together. She looked exhausted and grieving and utterly present. "You stayed," Marcus whispered. "Always." Dr. Harris cleared her throat gently. "Marcus, do you know where you are?" "Hospital, Memorial Heights." "Do you know what happened to you?" "Car accident, 3 months ago. Brakes were cut." The board members stirred at that. One of them, an older man with silver hair, stepped forward. "Mr. Sullivan, I am James Chen. We need to understand what you are saying. Are you claiming the accident was deliberate?" Marcus's eyes moved from Claire to the man. "Yes." "Do you know who is responsible?" Marcus hesitated. This was the moment he had been waiting for, preparing for, dreading. Once he spoke his brother's name, there would be no taking it back. The accusation would be made, and everything would follow from it. He looked back at Claire. She nodded slightly, giving him strength. "My brother," Marcus said clearly. Derek Sullivan cut the brake lines. The room erupted in controlled chaos. The board members began talking urgently among themselves. Dr. Harris was making notes. Security was speaking into radios. Through it all, Claire remained focused on Marcus. She moved to his bedside and took his hand, and that touch was the only thing that felt real in the surreal circus his life had become. "Dr. Harris," one of the security guards said, "Derek Sullivan is here. He is demanding to see his brother." Dr. Harris looked at Marcus. "This is your choice. Do you want to see him?" Marcus considered. Part of him wanted to refuse, to never see Derek again, to let lawyers and police handle everything. But another part, the part that remembered being 8 years old and reading together and promising to always take care of each other, that part knew they needed to face each other one more time. "Yes," Marcus said, "let him in." The security guards moved to allow Derek entry, but positioned themselves to intervene if necessary. The board members stepped back, becoming observers rather than participants. Derek Sullivan entered the room and stopped dead when he saw Marcus sitting up, eyes open, clearly conscious. The color drained from Derek's face. "Hello, little brother." "Derek." They looked at each other across the space of the hospital room, across the gulf of betrayal and grief and ruined brotherhood. Derek's expression was complex, shifting between emotions too quickly to identify. Shock, fear, regret, anger. "You have been awake," Derek said slowly. "The whole time. You have been pretending." "Not the whole time, but long enough." Derek looked around the room at the assembled witnesses, at the security guards, at the board members watching him with new wariness. His shoulders slumped slightly. "So you know about the breaks." "I know everything. I heard everything, every conversation, every plan, every word you said when you thought I could not hear you." Derek moved closer, ignoring the security guards who tensed. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. Understanding does not erase what you did." "I know." Derek's voice was raw. "But I need to say it anyway. I need you to hear this while I still can." He stopped a few feet from the bed, far enough to be non-threatening, but close enough to be heard clearly. "I did not want you dead. I wanted you gone. There is a difference. The difference is slim when the method is the same." Derek flinched. "You are right. I know you are right. But, Marcus, do you have any idea what it has been like? Being your shadow for 32 years? Being the brother who tried harder, worked longer, sacrificed more, and still could never measure up? That is not my fault." "No, it is not your fault. It is Dad's fault for making love conditional on achievement. It is my fault for letting his standards become my own. It is a whole family's fault for being broken in ways we could not admit or fix." Derek's voice cracked. "But Marcus, you were not blameless either." Marcus felt anger flash through him. "I was blameless in attempted murder." "You were blind to my pain. You accepted every advantage, every bit of praise, every moment in the spotlight without once thinking about what that cost me. You never advocated for me, never told Dad to notice me, never tried to share the pedestal you stood on." Claire's hand tightened on Marcus's. He looked at her, then back at his brother. "You are right," Marcus said quietly. "I was blind. I was privileged and oblivious, and I benefited from our father's favoritism without questioning it. I am sorry for that. Truly sorry." Derek seemed taken aback by the admission. "But Derek," Marcus continued, "that does not justify what you did. You tried to kill me. You almost succeeded. And in the months since, you have been planning to finish what you started. You were going to pull my medical support. You admitted it." "I know." "So what now? What happens between us now?" Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket slowly, careful not to alarm the security guards, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is my resignation from Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, effective immediately. And this," he pulled out a second document, "is a full confession. The mechanic I hired, the money I paid, everything." He placed both documents on the table beside Marcus's bed. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I am asking for you to understand that I regret every choice that led to this moment. I wish I had been stronger, wiser, better. But I was not. And now I have to live with that." Marcus looked at the papers, then at his brother. "What will you do?" "Turn myself in. Face the consequences. Try to find some way to live with what I have done." Derek's smile was bitter. "Maybe prison will be easier than living in your shadow. At least there, everyone is equally reduced." "Derek." "What?" "I do not hate you." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "You should." "I know, but I do not. I am angry and hurt and betrayed. But underneath all that, I still remember the brother who read to me when I had nightmares, the brother who tried to protect me after Mom died. That person was real, Derek. What you became does not erase who you were. A single tear tracked down Derek's cheek. I am sorry, Marcus, for all of it, for the accident, for hating you, for not being able to be happy for your success, for being so weak that I chose violence over honesty. I know. Derek turned to leave, but Marcus called out, Derek, wait! His brother stopped, but did not turn around. Get help, real help, therapy, whatever you need to figure out why you became this person. And maybe someday, after you have served your time and done the work, maybe we can talk again. Not as we were. We can never be as we were, but as something new. Derek's shoulders shook. Then he nodded once and left, flanked by security guards who would escort him to the police station where he would make his confession official. The room was silent in the aftermath. The board members looked stunned. Dr. Harris was making notes with shaking hands. The nurses stood frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. Only Claire moved. She sat on the edge of Marcus's bed, still holding his hand, her eyes searching his face. That was remarkable, she said softly, forgiving him like that. I did not forgive him. I just did not close the door forever. There is wisdom in that. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since waking. You are exhausted. My mother died yesterday. I know, I am so sorry. She was ready, and she told me to be here with you, so I am here. The medical team began to quietly file out, giving them privacy. Dr. Harris was the last to leave. I will be back in an hour to check on you, Mr. Sullivan. Try to rest. Then they were alone. Marcus and Claire, no longer nurse and patient, no longer keeper and kept. Just two people who had built something profound in the most unlikely circumstances, and now had to figure out if that something could survive in the real world. This is strange, Claire said. Talking to you like this, hearing your voice, seeing your eyes looking back at me. Strange good or strange bad? I do not know yet. Marcus tried to sit up straighter and winced. His body was weak, muscles wasted from months of immobility. Claire immediately moved to adjust his pillows, falling back into the caregiver role naturally. You should rest, she said. Your body has been through trauma. You need time to heal. I have been resting for 3 months. I am done resting. That is not how this works. Claire. She looked at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes, the vulnerability she was trying to hide behind professional concern. Sit with me, Marcus said. Please. Not as my nurse, just as yourself. Sit with me and let us figure out what happens now. Claire hesitated, then carefully sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to touch, but not touching. The space between them felt both vast and intimate. I do not know how to do this, she admitted. For months, I have known you in one way. Now I have to know you in another, and I am not sure the two versions match. Tell me what you are afraid of. I'm afraid you are being kind to a lonely nurse who talked too much. I'm afraid that what I felt, what I thought we had, was one-sided. I'm afraid that now you are awake and can have any life you want, you will realize I was just part of the ordeal you survived, not someone you actually want in your life. Marcus reached for her hand. She let him take it, but did not relax into the touch. Claire, look at me. She met his eyes. For 3 months, I listened to you. Not because I had no choice, although that was true at first, but because your voice was the only thing that kept me human. Every night you came in and talked to me like I mattered, like I was not just a problem to solve or an obstacle to remove. You saw me when I could not even see myself. He paused, gathering words he had been composing for months. You told me about your mother and your dreams and your fears. You read to me and played music and held my hand when you thought I could not feel it. You gave me everything without asking for anything in return. Do you know how rare that is? How extraordinary? Claire's eyes filled with tears. And yes, Marcus continued, I heard you say you loved me. I heard you, and I spent every silent moment after wishing I could tell you I loved you back. Not because you were caring for me, but because you are exactly who I would have chosen if I had been free to choose. You are kind without being weak, strong without being hard. You care deeply about people while maintaining yourself. You are everything I did not know I needed. A tear slipped down Claire's cheek. She did not wipe it away. So no, Marcus said firmly. You were not one-sided. You are not a convenient distraction. You are the woman I love. And if you will have me, broken and complicated, and still recovering from both my injuries and my brother's betrayal, I want to build something real with you. Not patient and nurse, but partners, equals. Two people who found each other in the darkest circumstances and chose to hold on. Claire was crying openly now. But you do not even know me. Not really. You know what I told you. But that is not the same as knowing someone. Then let me know you. Let us take time. Let us date like normal people and figure out if what we built in silence can exist in conversation. But Claire, do not walk away because you are scared. We have both been through too much to let fear win now. She looked at him for a long time, searching his face for something. Sincerity, perhaps, or the man she had imagined him to be. Whatever she found, it was enough. Okay, she said softly. Okay, we will try. That is all I'm asking. Arising. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. The same gesture she had made when he was still trapped in silence. But this time he could lift his free hand and cup the back of her head, holding her there, sharing breath and space and possibility. I am going to disappoint you sometimes, Claire whispered. I am not always strong. I am grieving my mother. I have debt and no savings and a tiny apartment. I work too much and do not take care of myself, and I talk too much when I am nervous. Good, Marcus said. I would rather have your real flaws than someone else's perfection. She pulled back enough to look at him. What are your flaws? I am stubborn. I work too much. I am bad at asking for help. I spent 3 months lying to everyone, including you, about being conscious. I have trust issues and a brother in prison, and a company that probably wants nothing to do with me after this scandal. Sounds like we are both disasters. Perfect. 2 disasters might make something whole. Claire laughed through her tears. That is terrible math. Maybe, but let us try it anyway. They sat together in the morning light, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely way possible. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be legal battles over Derek's actions, media attention, company politics, Claire's grief, Marcus's recovery. 1,000 obstacles between them and any kind of normal life. But they had survived worse. They had built connection in complete silence. They had trusted each other when trust seemed impossible. They had chosen to hold on when letting go would have been easier. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that, Marcus thought as he held Claire's hand and felt her heartbeat against his palm, that was enough to start with. The world beyond Suite 801 was less kind than the sanctuary Marcus and Claire had built within it. By noon on Sunday, news of his awakening had leaked to the press. By evening, the story had metastasized into a media circus that surrounded Memorial Heights Hospital like a siege. Cameras lined the sidewalks. Reporters shouted questions at anyone entering or leaving. The hospital's main entrance became impassable, forcing staff to use service doors. Security had to create a perimeter to keep journalists from sneaking into the building disguised as visitors or delivery people. The headlines wrote themselves. Billionaire wakes from coma after 3 months. Sullivan CEO claims brother tried to kill him. Corporate intrigue turns deadly. Each iteration more sensational than the last. Each caring less about truth than about clicks and views and advertising revenue. Marcus watched the coverage on the television in his room with a mixture of disgust and resignation. This was the cost of being public, of having built a company that mattered enough for people to care when its leadership imploded. Privacy was a luxury he had surrendered years ago, though he had never fully accepted that surrender until now. Dr. Harris limited his media exposure to 30 minutes a day. Any more than that, and his blood pressure spiked dangerously. His body was still recovering from months of forced stillness, and stress was the last thing his system needed. Claire had gone home Sunday afternoon to rest, though Marcus suspected rest was the last thing she would find in her empty apartment with her mother's funeral looming Tuesday. He wanted to go with her, to offer support, but he could barely stand without assistance. His legs trembled after 30 seconds of bearing his own weight. His muscles had atrophied to the point where walking to the bathroom required a nurse on each arm. The physical therapist who visited Monday morning was a no-nonsense woman named Sandra, who looked at Marcus with the detached assessment of someone who had seen 1,000 recovery cases and knew exactly how much work lay ahead. You have lost approximately 30% of your muscle mass, she said, checking his range of motion. Your cardiovascular system has deconditioned. Your balance is compromised. Your fine motor skills are degraded. In short, Mr. Sullivan, you have the body of someone 20 years older than you actually are. How long to recover? With aggressive physical therapy? 6 months to feel normal? A year to feel like yourself? 2 years to fully regain what you lost? And that is if you work at it every single day without exception. Then I will work at it every single day without exception. Sandra smiled slightly. Good, because the alternative is permanent disability. Your body will not recover on its own. You have to force it, and I promise you, it will hurt more than you think you can bear. Most people quit. I am not most people. We will see. The therapy began that afternoon. Sandra was not gentle. She pushed Marcus through exercises that left him shaking and nauseous, leg lifts that felt impossible, arm raises that made his shoulders scream, balance exercises that ended with him clutching the parallel bars to avoid collapsing. After an hour, Marcus was drenched in sweat and barely able to move. Good start, Sandra said. Same time tomorrow. That was a good start? No, that was terrible. But it is a start. Tomorrow, you will do slightly better. The day after, slightly better still. In 6 months, you will look back at today and not believe how weak you were. Marcus lay in his bed after she left, every muscle trembling, and understood that this was going to be harder than surviving the coma. At least in the coma, he had not felt the pain. Claire returned Monday evening. She looked hollowed out, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her movements slow with exhaustion. She had spent the day finalizing funeral arrangements and sorting through her mother's belongings, work that was both necessary and devastating. She entered Marcus's room and stopped just inside the door, uncertain. The dynamic between them had shifted so completely that old patterns no longer fit, and new ones had not yet formed. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm missing. Weak, frustrated, missing you." The honesty seemed to steady her. She moved to his bedside and took the chair she had occupied for months. But this time, she sat as a visitor rather than a nurse. "The funeral is tomorrow," she said. 2 in the afternoon, small service at the church my mother attended. Burial immediately after. I wish I could be there. You are still in the hospital, Marcus. You can barely walk. I know, but I wish I could anyway. Claire managed a small smile. My mother would have liked you. She was practical about most things, but she believed in love. Real love, not the fairy tale kind. The kind that shows up and does the work. Tell me about her. So Claire did. She talked about Elena's strength and her wisdom, and her refusal to be defeated by circumstance. She talked about growing up with a father who worked with his hands, and a mother who made home feel safe. She talked about learning to care for people by watching her parents care for each other. Marcus listened the way he had learned to listen during his months of silence, with his whole attention, without interrupting, letting the words paint a picture of a woman he would never meet, but who had shaped the person he loved. When Claire finished, it was dark outside. The hospital had grown quiet around them. "Thank you for listening," she said. I needed to talk about her. To someone who did not know her but cares anyway. I do care. About her because she mattered to you. About you because you mattered to me. Claire looked at him for a long moment. This is strange, being able to hear your voice, having you look at me and respond. For months you were this presence I talked to, and now you are a person I talk with. It feels different. Good different or bad different? I do not know yet. Ask me again in a few months. Fair enough. She stood to leave and Marcus reached for her hand. She let him take it, but did not sit back down. Claire, I need to tell you something. The media is going to get worse before it gets better. There will be cameras and questions, and probably people digging into your life looking for scandal. Dating me right now means stepping into that circus. I would understand if you wanted to wait, to let things settle before we try to be anything public. Are you trying to protect me or give yourself an out? Protect you. Then stop. I am not fragile, Marcus. I have spent my entire adult life dealing with hard things. I can handle reporters and cameras and gossip. What I cannot handle is you making decisions for me about what I can tolerate. You are right. I am sorry. Claire's expression softened. I appreciate that you want to protect me, but I need you to respect me more than you protect me. I need to be your partner, not someone you shelter. Understood. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, the same gesture she had made dozens of times when he could not respond. But this time, Marcus lifted his hand and touched her face, holding her there for a moment longer. I will see you after the funeral, she said. Unless you need me to come tonight. No, be with your grief, be with your memories. I will be here when you are ready. After she left, Marcus lay in the dark and thought about what she had said. Respect me more than you protect me. It was a hard lesson for someone who had spent his adult life in positions of authority, making decisions, controlling outcomes. But she was right. Partnership required equality, and equality meant trusting her to know her own limits and make her own choices. The physical therapy on Tuesday morning was brutal. Sandra had Marcus attempt to walk the length of the parallel bars unassisted. He made it 4 steps before his legs gave out. She caught him, guided him back to standing, and made him try again, and again, and again. By the 6th attempt, Marcus was ready to quit. His muscles felt like they were tearing, his lungs burned, sweat dripped into his eyes. One more, Sandra said. I cannot. You can. Your body is capable of more than you think. The limitation is in your mind. Marcus wanted to argue, but he was too exhausted. He tried again. Made it 5 steps this time before collapsing. Better, Sandra said. Tomorrow you will make it 6. She was right. Wednesday, he made it 6 steps. Thursday, 8. By Friday, he could walk the full length of the parallel bars, though he needed to rest for 10 minutes afterward. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Tuesday afternoon, while Claire buried her mother, Marcus received visitors from his company's board. James Chen, who had been present for the awakening, led the discussion. With him came Margaret Walsh, the CFO, and Robert Kim, head of R&D. They pulled chairs close to Marcus's bed and got straight to business. Derek has been formally arrested and charged with attempted murder, James said. He is cooperating fully, providing documentation of the mechanic he hired, the shell companies he used, everything. The prosecutor thinks this will be a straightforward case. Good. However, Margaret continued, we have a problem. Derek made significant changes to company operations during your absence. He canceled several research programs, diverted funding away from compassionate pricing initiatives, and entered into contracts that prioritize profit over our stated mission. Can we reverse those changes? Some of them, yes. Others are legally binding and will take time to unwind. But Marcus, there is a larger question we need to address, which is whether you want to return as CEO. The question hung in the air. Marcus had not considered any alternative. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals was his creation, his legacy, his life's work. Of course he would return. But then he thought about Claire, about the life they might build together, about whether he wanted to spend the next 20 years in the pressure cooker of running a major corporation, or whether he wanted something else. I built this company to do good, Marcus said carefully. To create medications that help people and price them so everyone can access them, not just the wealthy. If the company has lost that mission, then I do not want to be CEO just to be CEO. I want to lead if I can restore our purpose. If I cannot, then I should step aside for someone who can. The 3 board members exchanged glances. We were hoping you would say that, Robert Kim said, because frankly, the company needs you. Your vision is what made us special. Derek's changes have been profitable in the short term, but they are destroying everything you built. The staff is demoralized. Our reputation is suffering. We need you back. On one condition, Marcus said. I do not return full-time immediately. I spend the next 6 months focused on physical recovery and personal life. I consult, I guide strategy, I remain chairman. But I am not in the office 80 hours a week. I have learned something these past months. Life is too short to spend it all working. James Chen smiled. Agreed. We will find an interim CEO to manage day-to-day operations. You focus on setting direction and recovering. When you are ready, we revisit full-time leadership. And the mission, the programs Derek cut, we restore them. All of them. Even if it costs us profit margin. That is what we agreed when we voted you back. Then I am in. They shook hands and Marcus felt a weight lift that he had not realized he was carrying. He could have his company and his life. He could lead without sacrificing everything else. It was possible to do both if he was willing to set boundaries he had never allowed himself before. Claire returned to the hospital Wednesday evening. The funeral was behind her, the initial shock of loss beginning to settle into the long ache of grief. She looked tired but more settled, as if having said her goodbyes had given her permission to start moving forward. She found Marcus in the physical therapy room, attempting to walk on a treadmill set to the slowest possible speed. Sandra stood beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. "Look at you," Claire said from the doorway. "Walking." "Barely," Marcus managed between labored breaths. "Still counts." She watched him complete another minute on the treadmill before Sandra called time. Marcus was drenched in sweat, trembling, but he had stayed upright the entire time. "You are making real progress," Sandra said. "In a week, we will try stairs." After Sandra left and Marcus had showered and changed with the help of a nurse, Claire settled into her usual chair. But the dynamic was different now. She was not here as his caregiver, but as someone who cared about him. The distinction mattered. "The funeral was beautiful," Claire said. "Small, but meaningful. My mother would have approved. I am glad. Everyone asked about you. Word has gotten around about the nurse who fell in love with her patient. We are apparently quite the story. How do you feel about that?" "Complicated. Part of me wants privacy. Part of me does not care what anyone thinks. Mostly I am just tired of people having opinions about my life. That will get worse before it gets better. The media is relentless." "I know." Claire looked at him directly. "Are you having second thoughts? About us?" "No. Are you?" "Sometimes. Not about you. About whether I'm ready for this. My mother just died. I am grieving. Starting a relationship right now might not be wise." Marcus chose his words carefully. "Then we go slowly. We take time. We do not rush into anything just because the story of how we met is dramatic. We build something real at whatever pace feels right. You would be okay with that? With slow?" "I spent 3 months learning patience. I think I can manage a few more." Claire smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her since her mother died. "Okay, slow it is." They spent the next hour talking about practical things, where Marcus would go when he was released from the hospital, how they would handle the media attention, what Claire's work situation would be now that she was no longer his nurse. The hospital had offered to transfer her to a different floor, understanding that her relationship with Marcus created conflicts of interest if she remained on the private suite wing. Claire had accepted, taking a position in the cardiac care unit that would start the following week. Marcus would be discharged to a rehabilitation facility in 10 days, assuming his progress continued. After that, likely another month before he could function independently at home. The timeline was long but manageable. They were figuring it out, slowly, carefully, like two people learning to walk together after one of them had forgotten how. The weeks that followed settled into routine. Marcus spent mornings in physical therapy, pushing his body through exercises that grew incrementally easier but never easy. Afternoons were for business calls and strategy sessions with his board. Evenings were for Claire, when she could visit between her own shifts at the hospital. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. They argued occasionally, usually about Marcus trying to do too much too soon, or Claire working extra shifts she did not need to work. But they were learning each other's edges, the places where they needed space, and the places where they needed connection. 3 weeks after waking, Marcus made it up a flight of stairs. Small victory, enormous effort. 4 weeks after, he could shower without assistance. 5 weeks after, he walked out of Memorial Heights Hospital under his own power, though he still needed a cane for stability. The media was waiting. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. Marcus had prepared a brief statement with the hospital's public relations team, and he delivered it from the top of the entrance steps, with Claire standing slightly behind him and to his left. 3 months ago, I was the victim of a crime that nearly cost me my life. I am grateful to the medical staff at Memorial Heights Hospital for their exceptional care during my recovery. I am grateful to the Chicago Police Department for their thorough investigation. And I am especially grateful to Claire Bennett, whose dedication and compassion reminded me why life is worth fighting for. He paused, letting that sink in. My brother Derek has been charged with attempted murder. I will not comment on the ongoing legal case, except to say that I hope the justice system provides accountability, while also recognizing that hurt people, and healing must be part of any real justice. Another pause. I am returning to Sullivan Pharmaceuticals in a consulting role as I continue my physical recovery. The company will restore all programs focused on compassionate pricing and accessibility. We will remember that profit without purpose is just greed. Finally, he looked directly at the cameras. To those of you who are fascinated by my personal life, I ask for patience and respect. Ms. Bennett and I are navigating a relationship that began in highly unusual circumstances. We deserve the space to figure out what it means without constant scrutiny. I will not be taking questions today. Thank you. He turned and walked down the steps, Claire beside him. Security cleared a path to the waiting car. Cameras followed them the entire way, but Marcus kept his eyes forward and his hands steady on his cane. In the car, Claire let out a breath she had been holding. That was intense. Welcome to my world. Do we have to do that often? No. After today, we fade from the news cycle. Something else will become the story. We become boring. I could use boring. Marcus took her hands. Me too. The rehabilitation facility was more hotel than hospital. Private suite, physical therapy equipment, nutritionist, personal trainers. Everything designed to help wealthy patients recover in comfort. Claire visited every evening after her shifts. They fell into a routine. She would arrive around 8. They would eat dinner together. Then they would talk or watch television or simply exist in comfortable silence. On weekends, when weather permitted, they sat in the facility's garden. November gave way to December. The trees were bare but beautiful in their starkness. Snow came early, dusting everything in white. One Saturday afternoon in mid-December, they sat bundled in coats and blankets, watching the snow fall. I have been thinking about something, Claire said, about what comes next. Next? After you are fully recovered, after this phase ends. What do we do then? Marcus had been thinking about the same question. What do you want to do? I want to work. I love being a nurse, but I also want to make a bigger impact. I keep thinking about what you said in your statement. Profit without purpose is just greed. I want to be part of something purposeful. What would that look like? Claire was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When I was caring for you, I kept thinking about all the patients I have had who were like you. Not wealthy, not famous, but conscious and trapped, and unable to communicate. People who get warehoused in long-term care facilities because there's no funding for the intensive support they need. Marcus listened, hearing the passion in her voice. What if we change that? Claire continued. What if we created a care facility specifically for patients with locked-in syndrome or severe communication disorders? A place with the staff and technology to help them maintain connection with the world, where they are treated like people who matter instead of problems to warehouse. That would be expensive. You have money. I do, but is that what you want? To run a care facility? I want to create something that would have made a difference for my father, for my mother, for you, for every patient who dies alone because no one has time to sit with them and really listen. Marcus took her hand. Then let us do it. Not because I have money, though that helps, but because you have vision and expertise and the compassion to make it work. We will fund it together. You run it. I support it. We make it sustainable so it outlasts us. Claire turned to look at him. You would do that? I have spent my career making medications, but medications only go so far. People need care, not just chemistry. If we can create a model that works, prove it can be both excellent and financially viable. Maybe we change how end-of-life care happens in this country. This would be a years-long project. I'm not going anywhere. Neither am I. They sat in the snow, holding hands, watching their breath cloud in the cold air. Two people who had found each other in impossible circumstances and decided to build something meaningful together. It was not a fairy tale. There was no dramatic kiss in the snow, no sweeping music, no perfectly scripted romantic gesture. Just two people making a practical plan to do good work together because that was what mattered to both of them. But sitting there in the quiet garden with snowflakes catching in Claire's hair and Marcus's hand warm in hers, it felt like something better than a fairy tale, and it felt like real life, complicated and messy and full of purpose. Marcus was released from the rehabilitation facility 2 days before Christmas. He had regained enough strength and mobility to function independently, though he still needed physical therapy 3 times a week and would for months to come. He rented a condo in downtown Chicago, something temporary, while he figured out where he wanted to live long-term. The penthouse he had owned before the accident felt like it belonged to a different person, someone who had valued status symbols over substance. He sold it without sentimentality. Claire helped him move into the new place. It was modest by billionaire standards, just 2 bedrooms and an open living space with large windows overlooking the city. but it felt human in a way his previous residents never had. They spent Christmas together, their first holiday, as something more than nurse and patient, but not quite yet partners in the fullest sense. Claire cooked dinner, a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, because neither of them felt like celebrating elaborately so soon after Elena's death. After dinner, they sat on the couch with coffee and watched the snow fall outside. "My mother always said Christmas was about presents, not presents," Claire said, "about being with people who matter." She was wise. She was. I miss her. I know. Claire leaned against Marcus, and he put his arm around her. They sat that way for a long time, two people learning how to be together, how to share silence, how to build something that might last. Eventually, Claire spoke again. "Thank you for this year. I know it has been terrible in a lot of ways, but it has also been the most meaningful year of my life. Because of your mother? Partly, but also because of you, because of what we survived together. I feel like I understand now what really matters. Not stuff or status or any of that. Just connection, purpose, love." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "I feel the same way. 3 months in a coma taught me more than 30 years of success. Taught me what I'd been missing, which was this, exactly this, someone to sit with in silence and feel completely present." They stayed on the couch until Claire fell asleep against his shoulder. Marcus sat awake, watching her breathe, feeling grateful for every moment that had led to this one. The accident, the pain, the waiting, the uncertainty. All of it had been necessary to bring them here. He thought about Derek, sitting in a jail cell awaiting trial. He thought about their father, dead now but still casting shadows. He thought about all the ways people could hurt each other, and all the ways they could heal. Justice would happen. Derek would face consequences for his choices. But Marcus hoped that somewhere in that process, his brother might find the help he needed to understand why he had become someone capable of violence. Maybe in 10 years, 20 years, they could have a conversation as men who had both learned hard lessons. Maybe not. Either way, Marcus had made peace with not knowing. What he did know was this. He loved the woman sleeping against his shoulder. He wanted to build something meaningful with her. He had a second chance at life, and he was not going to waste it on anything that did not matter. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The city lights glowed through the white, and inside the modest condo, two people who had found each other in darkness rested together in peace, ready to face whatever the light would bring. Spring came to Chicago the way it always did, grudgingly and in fits and starts. February brought false hope in the form of a few warm days that melted the snow and made people shed their heavy coats prematurely. March responded with ice storms that reminded everyone that winter was not finished yet. But by April, the city finally surrendered to the season, and green things began to push through the hard ground with stubborn determination. Marcus stood at the construction site in the early morning light, watching the framework of what would become the Listen Foundation take shape. The building sat on 3 acres in a quiet neighborhood on Chicago's west side, close enough to the city for access, but far enough out for peace. 2 stories, large windows, garden spaces planned for the grounds, designed specifically for patients who needed intensive care, but also needed dignity and connection. The architect had incorporated Claire's vision into every detail. Rooms large enough for families to gather, common spaces for group therapy and social interaction, technology infrastructure to support communication devices for patients with limited mobility, staff areas positioned to encourage interaction rather than isolation. Everything built around the principle that care was not something done to people, but something shared with them. Marcus came to the site most mornings now. He had regained enough strength that the walk from the parking area to the construction trailer no longer winded him, though he still carried a cane more from habit than necessity. Physical therapy had become part of his routine, as automatic as brushing his teeth. His body would never be exactly what it was before the accident, but it was strong enough for the life he wanted to build. The company was thriving under his guidance, even though he only worked 3 days a week in the office. The interim CEO, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who had previously run operations, had proven more than capable of managing daily business. Marcus focused on strategy, on keeping the mission aligned with profit, on ensuring that Derek's changes were fully reversed. The board had worried that his reduced schedule would signal weakness or lack of commitment. Instead, it had energized the staff. Seeing their founder choose balance over burnout, seeing him prioritize purpose over mere profit, it reminded everyone why they had joined Sullivan Pharmaceuticals in the first place. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Running late, patient emergency. Start the meeting without me." He texted back. "No rush, building is not going anywhere." Claire was still working full-time as a cardiac nurse, though she had started transitioning into a consulting role with the Listen Foundation. By summer, she would leave bedside nursing entirely to become the Foundation's Director of Patient Care. But for now, she was finishing out her commitment to Memorial Heights, training her replacement, making sure the transition was smooth. She approached her work the way she approached everything, with thoroughness and care and absolute unwillingness to cut corners. Marcus loved that about her. She did not know how to do things halfway. Their relationship had developed slowly over the past 4 months, exactly as they had agreed. They saw each other several times a week, but maintained separate residences. They had been on proper dates, dinners and movies, and walks through the city. They had argued about foundation decisions and business strategy, and whose turn it was to choose what they watched on television. They had learned each other's rhythms and routines, and the small habits that made each of them who they were. Marcus knew that Claire ate chocolate when she was stressed, that she could not sleep if there were dirty dishes in the sink, that she talked to herself when she was working through a problem, that she cried during sad commercials but maintained perfect composure during actual tragedies. Claire knew that Marcus woke at 5 every morning regardless of when he went to sleep, that he was terrible at remembering to eat lunch, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a childhood bike accident, that he read biographies of scientists and inventors instead of fiction, because he liked learning how people solved impossible problems. They were building something real, not dramatic or cinematic, but solid and true. A partnership based on shared values and mutual respect, and the quiet confidence that came from having survived hard things together. The construction foreman arrived, and they spent an hour reviewing progress. The foundation was poured. Framing was ahead of schedule. They would be ready for inspections by May, with occupancy possible by August if everything proceeded without major delays. Claire arrived during the final walkthrough, still in her scrubs from the night shift. She looked tired but alert, the kind of exhaustion that came from good work completed well. "Sorry I am late. We had a code that lasted 2 hours. Everyone okay?" "Everyone survived. That is as much as we can ask some days." They walked the site together, Claire pointing out where specific patient rooms would be, where the therapy spaces would go, where families could gather for difficult conversations. She had thought through every detail, anticipated every need. This was not just a building to her. It was a mission made physical. After the meeting, they sat in Marcus's car with coffee from the trailer, watching workers move materials and position equipment. "Derek's trial starts next week," Marcus said quietly. "I know. Are you going?" "Some days. Not all of them. I do not need to hear every detail of what he did, but I want him to see me there, to know I am not hiding." "That is generous." "It is practical. He needs to understand that I have moved on, that his actions did not destroy me. Maybe that helps him more than my absence would." Claire reached over and took his hand. "How are you feeling about it?" Marcus considered the question. "Sad. Angry sometimes, though less than I was. Mostly I just want it finished so we can all move forward." "What do you think will happen?" "His lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. Reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation and mental health treatment. The prosecutor might accept it to avoid a trial. Would you be okay with that?" "I would. If Derek gets help, real help, then maybe some good comes from this. If he just goes to prison and comes out bitter and unchanged, then what is the point?" Claire nodded. "My mother used to say that punishment without rehabilitation is just revenge. She believed people could change if they had the right support. Do you believe that?" "I want to." Claire sipped her coffee. "I have seen people surprise me. Patients who should not have survived. Addicts who got clean. People who made terrible choices and then spent years making better ones. So, yes, I believe change is possible. Just not easy or guaranteed." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the construction site come alive with activity. This was what they had become to each other. A place where difficult truths could be spoken without judgment. a space where silence did not need filling. Eventually, Claire glanced at her watch. I should get home, sleep a few hours before my next shift. Come to dinner tonight? I will cook. You will cook. Should I bring a fire extinguisher? I have learned things. I have a repertoire of 3 meals now. Impressive. Claire kissed him goodbye, a quick press of lips that was becoming familiar and comfortable. Then she drove away, and Marcus watched her go before starting his own day. Derek's trial lasted 2 weeks. Marcus attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Claire beside him and the weight of media attention pressing down from every direction. Cameras followed them to and from the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions that went unanswered. The whole spectacle was exhausting and invasive, and exactly what Marcus had known it would be. Derek sat at the defense table looking smaller than Marcus remembered. Prison had changed him, or maybe facing the consequences of his actions had. The arrogance was gone. The bitterness had been replaced by something that looked like genuine remorse. The evidence was overwhelming. The mechanic testified about being hired to sabotage the brakes. Financial records showed the payments from Derek's shell company. Company witnesses described Derek's systematic takeover during Marcus's incapacitation. Derek's own confession, given voluntarily to police, detailed everything. The defense did not argue innocence. Instead, they presented psychological evaluations showing years of untreated depression and anxiety, testimony from family friends about the damaging favoritism Derek had endured, expert witnesses explaining how long-term emotional trauma could lead to catastrophic choices. It was not a defense of the crime, it was an explanation of the person who committed it. On the 5th day of testimony, Derek himself took the stand. His lawyer walked him through his childhood, his relationship with their father, the accident, and its aftermath. Derek answered clearly and honestly, not making excuses, but providing context. Then the prosecutor stood for cross-examination. Mr. Sullivan, you say you did not want your brother dead. Just out of the way. Can you explain the functional difference when you cut someone's brake lines? Derek flinched. There is no functional difference. I told myself there was because I needed to believe I was not capable of murder. But attempting to kill someone and wanting them dead are the same action. I understand that now. Do you expect this jury to believe you are sorry? I do not expect anything. Derek's voice was steady. I'm sorry. Genuinely, completely sorry. But sorry does not undo what I did. Sorry does not give my brother back the months he lost or erase the fear he experienced. Sorry is inadequate, but it is all I have to offer. What do you want the jury to know about you? That I am a man who made the worst possible choice when faced with pain I did not know how to process. That I am trying to understand why so I can become someone different. That I hope my brother can build a life where I am not a constant shadow. And that if I spend the rest of my life in prison, I will have received justice, not injustice. The prosecution sat down, and Derek was excused. He walked back to his seat without looking at Marcus, though his shoulders shook slightly with suppressed emotion. Claire leaned close to Marcus and whispered, "He means it. Everything he said, he really means it." I know. Do you believe he can change? I believe he is trying to. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a verdict, guilty on all counts. Derek showed no reaction, simply nodding once as if he had expected nothing else. Sentencing came a week later. The judge acknowledged Derek's cooperation and remorse, but stated clearly that attempted murder required serious consequences. 15 years in prison with possibility of parole after 10 if he completed mental health treatment and demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. Derek stood to receive the sentence with dignity. Then, for the first time since the trial began, he looked directly at Marcus. "I am sorry," he said, his voice carrying across the courtroom. "I know that does not fix anything, but I am sorry." Marcus nodded once, an acknowledgement without forgiveness. Understanding without reconciliation. It was as much as either of them could offer in this moment. As Derek was led away, Marcus felt Claire's hand slip into his. They left the courthouse together, walking through the gauntlet of cameras and questions and public curiosity, and climbed into the car that would take them back to their lives. "Are you okay?" Claire asked as they drove. "I do not know. Ask me tomorrow." Fair enough. They went to Marcus's condo and sat on the couch, not talking, just being present for whatever emotions needed to surface. Eventually, Marcus spoke. "My father did this. Not the crime, that was Derek's choice, but the conditions that made the choice possible. Dad created a competition between us that only one of us could win, and he made sure I always won. Derek never had a chance. Your father made bad choices, but Derek made his own choice too. Both things can be true. I know, but I keep thinking about all the moments I could have changed things. If I had stood up to Dad more, if I had refused some of the praise, if I had insisted Derek be recognized. You cannot rewrite the past, Marcus. You can only choose what you do now. And what should I do now? Build something good, help people, love well. That is the best revenge against all the damage your father caused. Marcus pulled her close. When did you become so wise? When I spent 3 months talking to a man who could not respond. Turns out one-sided conversations are very clarifying. He smiled despite the weight of the day. What would I do without you? Probably something noble and stupid. Good thing I am here to keep you grounded. They stayed on the couch through the evening, ordering takeout and watching mindless television, and allowing themselves to simply exist without the pressure of being productive or purposeful. Sometimes rest was the most important work. Summer arrived properly in June, bringing heat and humidity and the particular smell of Chicago in warm weather. The Listen Foundation building was nearly complete. Workers were installing fixtures and finishing interior spaces. The gardens had been planted and were beginning to establish. Equipment was being delivered and installed. They were weeks away from occupancy. Claire had transitioned full-time to her role as Director of Patient Care. She spent her days hiring staff, developing protocols, working with technology vendors to ensure communication systems met the needs of their specific patient population. She was in her element, building something from vision to reality. Marcus watched her work with admiration that bordered on awe. She had a gift for organization and leadership that he had not fully recognized during their hospital time together. She was thoughtful but decisive, compassionate but unwilling to accept mediocrity. Staff respected her immediately because she clearly knew what she was doing and cared deeply about doing it well. They hired 15 nurses, 8 therapists, 3 physicians, support staff for housekeeping, and food service and maintenance. Every person Claire interviewed, she asked the same question. Why do you want to work with patients who cannot communicate easily? And she listened carefully to their answers, looking for people who understood that care was about presence, not just procedures. In July, they admitted their first patient, Thomas Brennan, 58 years old, who had suffered a brainstem stroke 6 months earlier and been left with locked-in syndrome, fully conscious but unable to move anything except his eyes. He had been in a nursing home, receiving basic care but little stimulation, slowly losing hope that his life had any meaning left. Claire and her team set him up in a corner room with large windows overlooking the garden. They fitted him with an eye-tracking computer that allowed him to spell words by looking at letters on a screen. They established a routine of music therapy, reading groups, visits from family that were facilitated rather than merely tolerated. Within a week, Thomas had written his first message. "Thank you for seeing me. I thought I had disappeared." Claire read the message aloud to the staff during their morning meeting, and several nurses openly cried. This was why they were here. This was what they had built. Over the next month, they admitted 7 more patients, each with their own story, each needing different support, each deserving dignity and connection, and the knowledge that they still mattered. The foundation operated on a hybrid funding model that Marcus and Claire had developed together. Wealthy patients who could afford to pay full cost subsidized care for those who could not. Insurance covered what it would. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals provided an annual grant. Fundraising covered the gap. It was not perfect, but it worked. More importantly, it proved that excellent end-of-life care did not have to be reserved for the wealthy. With the right model, it could be accessible to everyone. On a humid evening in August, Marcus found Claire in her office at the foundation, finishing paperwork after her staff had gone home. She looked up when he knocked, and her face lit with the smile she reserved just for him. "Late night?" "Always, but good late. We admitted 2 new patients today, both integrating well." Marcus sat in the chair across from her desk. "I have something I want to talk to you about." Claire set down her pen. "That sounds serious." "Not serious. Important. There is a difference." He pulled a small box from his pocket and set it on the desk between them. Claire looked at it, then at him. her expression impossible to read. "Before you open that," Marcus said, "I need to say something. These past months with you have been the best of my life. Not because they were easy, they were not, but because they were real. Because we built something together that matters. Because I wake up every morning excited to see what we will create that day." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she did not speak. "You taught me what it means to really listen to someone, to be present without needing to fix or change or improve. You taught me that love is not about grand gestures, but about showing up day after day, choosing someone even when it is hard." He gestured to the box. "That is a ring. If you open it and decide you want to wear it, I will be honored and happy. If you open it and decide you need more time, that is fine too. We will keep building what we are building, and the question will stay open. There is no pressure, no timeline, just an offer." Claire picked up the box with trembling hands. She opened it slowly. Inside was a simple silver band with a small diamond, not ostentatious or showy, just beautiful in its simplicity. She looked at the ring for a long moment, then at Marcus. "You said I taught you to listen, but Marcus, you taught me that silence can be as meaningful as words, that presence is its own form of love, that the strongest people are the ones who admit when they need help." She took the ring from the box and held it up to the light. "My mother told me in her last days not to waste my life on grief when I could spend it on love. I think she would have liked you. I think she would have said you were exactly the kind of man worth choosing." She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." Marcus stood and moved around the desk. He pulled Claire to her feet and held her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, knowing that this moment, this quiet evening in an office where they had built something meaningful, was exactly right. They did not kiss dramatically or make grand declarations. They just held each other while the last light faded from the windows and the foundation settled into evening quiet around them. Eventually, Claire pulled back enough to look at him. "When?" "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now. I'm not in a hurry." "Fall?" "Fall works. Small ceremony?" "Very small, just people who actually matter." "Here at the foundation?" "Perfect." They made plans that night, sitting in her office with takeout from the diner down the street. No wedding planners or fancy venues or elaborate productions. Just a simple ceremony in the foundation gardens, followed by dinner with 20 people who had been part of their journey. The wedding took place on a Saturday in October, exactly a year after Marcus had woken from his imposed silence. The weather cooperated, providing one of those perfect autumn days that Chicago occasionally gifts: clear sky, comfortable temperature, leaves in full color. They set up chairs in the garden for the handful of guests. Dr. Harris attended, along with the nurses who had cared for Marcus at Memorial Heights, James Chen and other board members from Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, a few of Claire's nursing school friends, Thomas Brennan in his wheelchair, eye-tracking computer position so he could participate fully. No family except what they had chosen to make for themselves. Derek was still in prison. Marcus's remaining relatives had never been close. Claire's extended family had drifted after her mother's death. So they built their own family from the people who had shown up when it mattered. The officiant was a retired pastor who volunteered at the foundation. She kept the ceremony brief and meaningful. No long homilies or excessive ritual, just the essential promises. "Do you, Marcus Sullivan, choose Claire Bennett as your partner in this life? To build with her, struggle with her, celebrate with her, and stand beside her in whatever comes?" "I do." "Do you, Claire Bennett, choose Marcus Sullivan as your partner in this life? To build with him, struggle with him, celebrate with him, and stand beside him in whatever comes?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me and the commitment you have made to each other, I pronounce you married. Whatever words you say next to each other are between you and need no witness beyond your own hearts." Marcus took both of Claire's hands in his. "I promise to listen. Always. Even when the words are hard or the silence is difficult, I promise to be present, to show up, to choose you every day." Claire smiled through tears. "I promise to respect you more than I protect you, to believe you know your own strength, to build something meaningful alongside you, and to remind you to eat lunch because you always forget." The assembled guests laughed. They kissed, and everyone applauded. Then they moved inside for dinner, a simple meal catered by the foundation's kitchen staff. There were toasts and laughter and stories about how they had met that would never stop being remarkable no matter how many times they were told. Thomas Brennan spelled out a message that Dr. Harris read aloud. "You two give me hope. Seeing what you built from silence reminds me that I am not defined by what I cannot do, but by how I choose to exist anyway." Marcus raised his glass. "And you, Thomas, and everyone like you, are why we built this place. To remind us all that every life has dignity. Every voice deserves to be heard. Every person matters." As evening settled over the foundation, and the party moved from dinner to conversation to slow goodbyes, Marcus and Claire found themselves alone in the garden, where they had exchanged vows hours earlier. "How does it feel?" Marcus asked, "being married?" "The same as yesterday, which is exactly how it should feel." "No regrets?" "None. You?" "Not even one." They walked through the garden in the cooling evening air, past flower beds beginning their autumn fade, past benches where patients sat during therapy, past the building that housed people who needed care and received it with dignity. "I keep thinking about that first night," Claire said. "When I walked into your hospital room and talked to you like you could hear me, even though everyone said you could not." "I could. I heard every word." "I know, but at the time, I did not know if you could or not. I just believed it was important to speak to you like you mattered whether you could respond or not. That belief saved me. It saved me too." Claire stopped walking and turned to face him. "Before you, I thought caring for people meant sacrificing myself. Working double shifts, giving away money I did not have, saying yes to every request. I thought that was what love looked like. And now? Now I understand that love requires boundaries, that I can care deeply and still take care of myself, that sustainable compassion comes from balance, not burnout." Marcus pulled her close. "You taught me the same lesson, that success is not about how much you achieve, but about whether what you achieve matters. That legacy is not what you leave behind, but what you leave better." They stood in the garden as darkness fell completely, and the building behind them glowed with warm light from windows where patients rested and nurses made rounds, and the work of caring continued through the night. "This is it," Claire said softly. "This is what we built. This is the beginning. There is so much more we can do." "I know, but tonight, can we just be grateful for what we have already done?" "Tonight we can." They stayed in the garden until the cold drove them inside. Then they went home to the life they had built together. Simple, meaningful, full of purpose. Years later, people would ask them about the foundation, about how they made it work financially, about how they balanced excellent care with accessibility, about how they scaled the model to other cities. And Marcus and Claire would answer those questions with the practical details that mattered. But what they never quite captured in those explanations was the truth at the heart of everything they built, that the Listen Foundation was not really about facilities or funding or protocols. It was about the belief that every person deserved to be heard, that silence did not mean absence, that presence was its own form of healing. It was a belief born in a hospital room where a trapped man listened to a lonely nurse talk about her dreams, a belief tested through betrayal and grief and the hard work of recovery, a belief proven through years of showing up and doing the work and choosing each other and choosing to matter. The Listen Foundation would eventually operate in 12 cities. It would win awards and recognition and become a model for how end-of-life care could be done differently. It would help thousands of patients and families navigate the hardest moments of their lives with dignity intact. But on that October night when Marcus and Claire came home from their wedding and sat together on the couch with coffee and comfortable silence, none of that had happened yet. They were just two people who had found each other against impossible odds and decided to build something worth building. In the morning, there would be work to do, patients to care for, staff to support, problems to solve, the daily grind of turning vision into reality. But tonight, they rested in what they had already accomplished. Two people who had learned to listen, who had chosen presence over performance, who had built something real and true and lasting. Outside, the city moved through its rhythms. Trains rumbled, cars passed. People lived their lives with all the attendant joy and sorrow and confusion and hope that makes us human. Inside, Marcus and Claire sat together in the silence they had learned to trust. No words needed, No declarations required, just two people who had saved each other and now spent their lives saving others. It was not a fairy tale. There was no happily ever after because life does not work that way. There would be hard days ahead, conflicts and frustrations, and the inevitable friction of two strong people building a life together. But they had learned something in that hospital room that served them through every challenge that followed. They had learned that love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about choosing someone real, about showing up, about listening even when you cannot see a response, about believing that connection matters more than comfort. That lesson, learned in silence and tested through suffering, became the foundation of everything they built. Not just the Listen Foundation with its patience and its mission, but their marriage, their work, their legacy. Years later, when Marcus was asked what moment had defined his life, he never talked about building Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, or surviving his brother's betrayal, or becoming wealthy beyond measure. He talked about a November night in a hospital room when a nurse he had never met told him she believed he could hear her, and she would not let him be alone. And when Claire was asked what she was most proud of in her career, she never talked about the awards the foundation won, or the patients they helped, or the model they created. She talked about the night she sat beside a silent man and chose to speak to him with dignity, because that was what every human being deserved, whether they could respond or not. They had both been right to make those choices, and everything that followed, everything good and meaningful and lasting, grew from that one simple decision to treat another person like they mattered. In the end, that was what listening really meant. Not just hearing words, but believing that every person had value, that every silence held meaning, that presence was powerful, that love was not about grand gestures, but about small moments of choosing to stay. Marcus and Claire built a life on that principle, and the world was better because they did. The story that began in darkness and silence ended in light and sound, and a love that had been tested and proven true. Two people who found each other when both were lost. Two people who listened when no one else would. Two people who showed up and stayed and built something that outlasted them both. That was their legacy. Not wealth or fame or recognition, but the simple, profound truth that every voice deserves to be heard and every person deserves to be seen. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.